At around 4 p.m. on Friday, April 15, 2011, in Lorgues, France, 27-year-old Alexandre Deromme was on his way home when he received a call from his younger sister, Séverine. She was a high school student, and the siblings had a close relationship, often calling each other. However, today she called not to share good news or weekend plans. Instead, she informed him that their mother, Colette, had not picked her up after school as she usually did. The day before, Séverine had been with their father, who had taken her to school in the morning. She had tried calling their mother multiple times, but her calls went unanswered. This was unusual because their mother was normally very responsible, and there was no reason for her not to come and pick up her daughter. Séverine was worried that something might have happened, such as an accident. She advised Alexandre to check the situation and visit their mother's house. Alexandre was also worried, so he called his mother several times, but received no response. Finally, he decided to visit his mother's house himself. When Alexandre arrived, Séverine was already there, but she was still very anxious, even more than before. She was in the house with the gendarmes, and what they discovered was very concerning. Colette's car was parked in the driveway, the doors were unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. 52-year-old Colette had vanished without a trace. The keys to the house were also in the car, so Alexandre took them and went inside to see what was happening. The house was completely empty, as if she had simply disappeared. The gendarmes quickly began their search for Colette since the situation was becoming increasingly alarming. Initially, they suspected a robbery, but they found that nothing was stolen from the house. The doors and windows were untouched. In the back seat of the car, they discovered Colette's purse, which held all her identification, bank cards, and cash. She could not have left willingly without those items. Tension heightened. Even after 3 hours of searching, there was still no news. Both the house and the car were thoroughly examined, but no leads emerged. As a result, the search area was expanded to include the outskirts of the town. None of the neighbors had seen anything out of the ordinary, no suspicious noises or activity near Colette's home. To learn more about her, the police interviewed her relatives. Colette, a divorced mother of 4, was known for her reserved and calm demeanor. She was not someone who would spontaneously disappear. She had no mental health issues or addictions. At the time, Colette was working as a supermarket manager. She was polite, punctual, and a devoted mother. Everyone who knew her was confused and did not understand what had happened, as she had no troubling relationships and no history of violence. The evidence suggested that Colette's disappearance was not accidental. The police believed that whoever was involved in this incident was someone she was very familiar with. At the very least, Colette had allowed this person into her house or had given them the right to enter. After investigating, the police identified the primary suspect. She lived by herself in a small 2-story house. To save on expenses, she rented the first floor to a man named Bernard. During his interview, Bernard made some strange and unsettling remarks. He speculated on how Colette might have been abducted, suggesting that she could have been struck on the back of the head, rendering her unable to call for help. He also provided a detailed account of her medical condition, noting that she was diabetic and needed urgent assistance to avoid serious health consequences. His level of knowledge about Colette raised suspicions among the police. Furthermore, Colette's son, Alexandre, revealed that Bernard was in love with his mother, which could explain his insight into her behavior and routines. This revelation increased suspicions, as Bernard could potentially have a motive. Alexandre noted that, despite Bernard's interest, his mother did not reciprocate and had no intention of developing anything beyond friendship. She was solely focused on her children and her work, completely dismissing the idea of a romantic relationship with Bernard. When detectives investigated Bernard's background, they found that he had a criminal history. In 1999, he assaulted his girlfriend with a weapon after she tried to end their relationship. His ex described him as very hot-tempered and unable to control his rage. As a result of these incidents, suspicions about Bernard increased. Colette's lack of interest may have caused him to become angry, and what happened next remains unclear. In 1999, Bernard received a brief 6-year prison sentence for an attack, mainly because the girl he attacked survived. Now, he was called to the police station for questioning as the primary suspect in Colette's disappearance. The police were trying to determine when Colette went missing, and Bernard claimed to have useful information. He reported that on the afternoon of April 14, 2011, while watching television, he heard noises coming from the second floor, where Colette had lived. He could hear footsteps on the wooden floor, but then everything went quiet. He did not see Colette leave, making it likely that he was the last person to have seen her. However, the police were concerned about Bernard's behavior. He was unable to recall the exact time of the noises or even remember what show he was watching, raising further suspicions. Bernard's main problem was that he didn't have a verifiable alibi. However, there was no evidence against him, so the police had to let him go. The next morning, officers came to inspect his house. Bernard greeted them with shouts and was initially unwilling to let them enter. Eventually, he agreed to show them around the first floor of the rented property but continued to make odd comments. Notably, he pointed out a hatch that led to the basement. He remarked that if he had killed someone, he would have hidden the body there, yet he insisted he was innocent and claimed the basement was empty. Upon inspection, there was indeed no one there. Meanwhile, when law enforcement searched Colette's home, they discovered suspicious stains believed to be washed blood, but this could not be confirmed. Despite the lack of evidence, suspicion remained around Bernard. Deciding to keep a close watch on him, the detectives sought to establish the exact time of Colette's disappearance, but clues were scarce. She had been alone for several days with minimal contact with her neighbor until April 15th. Anything could have happened during that time. Investigators began to piece together her movements, partly based on Bernard's statement that he had heard loud noises from the floor above on April 14th, the day before she vanished. As the investigators looked into the case, they realized that no one had seen Colette since April 15th. They managed to locate her friend, who stated that he had last seen Colette on April 14th around 3:30 p.m. at a gathering with mutual friends. He mentioned that after leaving the party, she got into her car intending to drive to Draguignan but planned to stop at home first. This was the only information available and was considered a starting point for the investigation, as more than 40 hours had passed since she went missing. Communicating with Colette's friend helped them determine a rough timeline for when she went missing. In her car, investigators found not only her personal belongings but also her mobile phone. They began analyzing the phone to see whom Colette had communicated with in the hours leading up to her disappearance. Notably, there was a call that lasted about 40 seconds, made shortly before 3:30 p.m. The call was from Sylviane Fabre, Colette's ex-husband's sister. Sylviane was contacted, and she stated that she had met Colette during Colette's marriage to her brother. At that time, Colette's relationship with her husband was not very good, so they decided to separate. However, afterward, the former spouses and their families managed to maintain friendly relations. Sylviane mentioned that back in 2008, they collaborated with Colette to invest money in a joint business. Shortly before Colette's disappearance, the business partners had a small conflict regarding these assets, but Sylviane claimed that everything was resolved, and they continued to work together. Together, Sylviane and Colette created a real estate company that generated a substantial income, which provided Sylviane with a potential motive. Not only were they distant relatives, but they also had shared finances and property, which can often lead to such conflicts. Naturally, Sylviane denied any wrongdoing. Colette's daughter mentioned that Sylviane often had conflicts regarding their joint activities. They could argue and reconcile several times a day. However, Colette's daughter described all these disputes as minor issues that were resolved quickly. The gendarmes checked Sylviane's schedule for the last few days. She had an alibi confirmed by her son. For almost the entire duration of the investigation, suspicions against Sylviane were not substantiated, and the search operation again hit a dead end. On April 17, 2011, the prosecutor's office began a judicial investigation into the disappearance of Colette. With no leads left and all suspicious individuals cleared as unlikely suspects, there was no option but to notify the media and hope, with their assistance, to obtain new witnesses who might have noticed something. At a recent press conference, officials announced that while there were priority leads in the criminal investigation, no suspects had been identified. This news sparked significant interest among journalists, as the case could potentially involve themes of business, money, love, or betrayal. Consequently, rumors began circulating about Colette immediately, some of which were quite alarming. Her information, background, and photos quickly became prominent in newspapers and on television. Her children expressed their desire to see her again and shared how difficult her absence was for them. The most concerning aspect was that the critical 48-hour window for finding her alive had already passed, significantly diminishing the chances of a successful rescue. While the prosecutor's office hoped to gather new leads from the public through the media, the police were actively searching the nearby villages. Following the press conference, the search area was widened, and a special investigative unit took over the case. Colette's disappearance began to attract national attention. The media frenzy intensified as they attempted to connect her case with another notorious crime that had recently shaken France. A few days before Colette went missing in early April 2011, 5 members of the Dupont de Ligonnès family, including the wife and 4 children, were found murdered under the terrace of their home in Nantes. The head of the family, Xavier, disappeared shortly after the murders, having been spotted on the outskirts of the city on April 15. Authorities believe Xavier was responsible for the crime, and he was placed on a nationwide wanted list. Notably, the location of the massacre was only 30 kilometers from Colette's home. The media quickly linked these incidents together. The timing coincided with Colette's likely disappearance, raising the possibility that Xavier kidnapped her. An even stranger coincidence was that the Dupont de Ligonnès family lived in a house that Colette had sold in 1992. Xavier was viewed as a respectable citizen, a devoted husband, and a caring father who was engaged in his community and known for his honesty and fairness. However, it later emerged that Xavier was deep in debt at the time he murdered his family. Just days before the killings, he purchased cement, tools, and 4 bags of lime, suggesting he had a motive and was preparing for the crime. Journalists speculated that Xavier may have had a grudge against Colette, but the reason for his potential revenge remained unclear. Rumors spread quickly, with theories ranging from a fraudulent real estate deal to unrequited love. Others suspected it could be part of a planned escape. Xavier could have taken Colette so they could be together again. Witnesses came forward, claiming they had seen Xavier's car near her home. Some even reported seeing him stop in town on April 14th. Although these accounts seemed unlikely, detectives noticed clear connections between Xavier and Colette. This led them to investigate the possibility that the two had escaped together. Consequently, Colette shifted from being seen as a victim to potentially being viewed as an accomplice in crimes that might have involved Xavier's family. However, friends and family of Colette quickly disputed this theory, asserting that she was not capable of cruelty. As detectives explored new leads that emerged almost daily, they became convinced that there was no romantic or conspiratorial link between Xavier and Colette. They began to feel that the similarities between Xavier and Colette were merely coincidental or tragic coincidences. To definitively eliminate this theory, they decided to examine both Xavier's and Colette's mobile phones. They encountered a challenge. Xavier's phone could not be tracked, and there were no calls or messages from Colette's phone to his. After their investigation, they found no evidence of any contact between the two after the sale of the house. Although the theory regarding Xavier was intriguing, it ultimately consumed valuable police time and resources. 3 weeks after Colette's disappearance, any possible link to Xavier was dismissed. Xavier himself was never found, leaving the French police at an impasse. The case has reached a dead end and will not make any progress until at least May 15, 2011. On this day, about 30 kilometers from Lorgues, 2 tourists were returning from a forest hike and taking photos. While using a remote path to capture some scenic shots, they were hit by a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the side of the path. One of the tourists decided to investigate the source of the odor. As the woman approached a pile of stones, the smell intensified and became unbearable. When she moved one of the stones, she discovered a leg protruding from beneath the rocks. The tourists quickly called the police. Within minutes, Gendarmes arrived at the location and found the body of a woman in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine her gender. Only her clothing provided a clue. The police attempted to identify the victim but were initially unsuccessful. They took photographs of her clothes, accessories, and jewelry, which were then shown to the families of various women who had gone missing in the area. Among those families were the children of Colette. Her daughter and son recognized their mother based on what she was wearing. Although the gendarmes believed they had identified Colette a month after her disappearance, they chose to wait for more conclusive evidence. DNA analysis was necessary to confirm family ties, as appearance alone could not provide definitive proof. Ultimately, the examination verified the police's suspicions. The body was indeed identified as Colette Deromme. On May 17, 2011, an autopsy was conducted on the body that had been found at the Forensic Medical Institute. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains was so poor that the exact cause of death could not be determined. The forensic expert did confirm that Colette had not been abused before her death, but it did not help the police make much progress in the case. As a result, the investigation into her disappearance shifted focus to a murder investigation. On June 9, 2011, Colette's body was buried. Law enforcement officers attended the funeral, knowing that criminals sometimes show up at such events to witness the impact of their actions. Some may seek to relive their emotions, while others might derive satisfaction from seeing the grief of the victim's family. Several officers remained in vehicles, while others blended in with the attendees, discreetly observing the proceedings. During this time, the police noted that Sylvian, Colette's business partner and sister-in-law, was missing from the funeral. Although Sylvian and Colette were close, Sylvian's absence raised suspicions. This concern increased a few days later when Sylvian attempted to end her life. Although she survived with minor injuries and poisoning, her actions were alarming. When the police arrived after a call from Sylvian's neighbor, they found Sylvian lying on her couch at home. She was unable to fully express herself, so she was taken to a medical center for assistance. However, the officers did not leave empty-handed. They discovered a lengthy letter addressed to her son, David Perel, which was several pages long. While the letter did not contain explicit confessions regarding her actions concerning Colette, the detectives interpreted it as a potential admission of guilt prior to her death. The police decided to speak with David, and he provided new insights into the troubled relationship between Sylvian and Colette. He believed that shortly before Colette's death, she and Sylvian had experienced a serious conflict related to their shared business. Intrigued, the detectives asked David to recount his activities on April 14th. He described the daytime as uneventful, but his account of the evening was much more compelling. On April 14th, at around 10 p.m., Sylvian asked David to drive her to Colette's house to discuss some important business matters. Her own car was broken, so she turned to him for help. However, on their way, his car also broke down a few kilometers from home. Despite the rain, they decided to walk back instead. He took the car battery with them, and together they returned in an attempt to fix the car. On the night Colette disappeared, this mother and son spent hours in the rain attempting to repair a car left outside the city. The gendarmes suspected that David was trying to create a questionable alibi to explain his absence from home. This suspicion was further fueled by Sylvian's initial statement to the detectives, in which she claimed she had spent the previous days at home. It seemed implausible that she could forget such a significant event. When Sylvian regained consciousness in the medical center, her account of the events changed. Her new story mirrored what her son had previously told, including all the important details. The gendarmes decided to investigate her claims. They found that on the night of April 14th to 15th, there was no rain in the area. Additionally, it was odd that Sylvian and her son were unable to flag down a passing car for a ride home. Why did they walk so far while carrying a battery with them? The road's vehicle monitoring system revealed that approximately 5 cars passed by during the time they were walking home. It seemed unlikely that none of these drivers would have stopped to assist them in the rain. This raised suspicions that David and Sylvian were hiding something and might be involved in the death of Colette. Unfortunately, there was no physical evidence to support these suspicions. As a result, the decision was made to keep a close watch on them over the next few months. Their phone calls were monitored, and on February 8, 2012, this surveillance yielded important information. The police intercepted a conversation between Sylvian and Bernard, who was Colette's neighbor. It became clear that Bernard knew much more than he had initially revealed. On April 14, he not only heard sounds coming from above but also saw Sylvian's car arrive at the house, indicating he was aware of her actions. David, Sylvian's son, was also involved, as he was driving for his mother. On February 20, 2012, David and Sylvian were arrested. Detectives viewed David as the weak link. During questioning, he quickly confessed, seeming relieved to unburden himself of his guilt. He revealed that on April 14, they arrived at Colette's home around 3:30 p.m. Afterward, Sylvian lured her into a barn behind the house. A business dispute led to further conflict, during which Sylvian attacked Colette, beating her to the ground. Then, she took a rope from the barn and began to strangle Colette in front of David. Although he did not intervene or participate in the attack, he admitted to helping move the body afterward. They left Colette's body on the property, covering it with a tarpaulin. In the evening, when they fabricated the story about the broken car, they took the body out of town. David assisted Sylvian in dragging the deceased away from the road and covering her with stones. Despite David's confession, Sylvian denied any wrongdoing. She claimed the death was accidental and that they hid the body out of fear of the police. However, it was puzzling how well prepared she seemed for the crime, as she had latex gloves that prevented her from leaving fingerprints. After being detained for 48 hours, Sylvian was charged with murder, while David was released. Though he was viewed as an accomplice, his testimony needed verification, so he remained under judicial supervision. The next step was to determine the motive. It turned out that the motive was linked to financial issues. Sylvian's business was on the brink of failure when Colette uncovered that Sylvian was embezzling money from clients. Another possible motive was jealousy, as Colette was thriving while Sylvian's problems continued to grow. Shortly before the tragedy, Sylvian had gone through a painful divorce, and one of her 2 sons had been convicted of violence. Communication between her and David had nearly ceased, and his involvement in the crime marked the end of their close relationship. On January 21, 2014, David was charged in court with the murder of Colette. He claimed that he was only an accomplice and that he helped hide the body due to pressure from his mother. Sylvian, his mother, argued that the incident was an act of involuntary manslaughter. She explained that she had lost her temper after a conflict with her business partner, Colette, who was trying to take everything from her. Facing life in prison, Sylvian sought to downplay her guilt. The prosecutor's office looked into the role of the tenant, Bernard. Although he witnessed the conflict between Sylvian and Colette, he did not report it because he feared Sylvian. Ultimately, he testified as a witness for the prosecution. On January 23, 2014, the jury found Sylvian Fabre guilty of manslaughter, sentencing her to 30 years in prison. Bernard was acquitted, and David Perel received a 3-year suspended sentence. Over the years, Colette's children struggled to understand what had happened in that barn with their mother. Despite the complicated trial, they felt uncertain that the entire truth had been uncovered. They were unhappy with the court's verdict, believing that Sylvian had committed premeditated murder but had received a lenient sentence. Additionally, they felt Bernard was more involved than he had admitted and had evaded responsibility for the crime. The case of Colette Deromme is a tragic and mysterious story that leaves many unanswered questions for her family and the community. Colette, a devoted mother, suddenly disappeared, leading to a lengthy investigation filled with suspicions of love, money, and betrayal. Ultimately, the truth was revealed through David's confession and Sylvian's sentencing, but was justice truly served? Bernard, the neighbor with a murky past, remains a significant question mark as he evades all charges. For Colette's children, the pain lies not only in losing their mother but also in the feeling that the secrets surrounding their mother's death may be buried forever. Anna Nezovich, a U.S. citizen, had moved to Madrid after 13 years of marriage to take some time for herself and start anew. While in Madrid, she was involved in finalizing her divorce, making future plans, and keeping in touch with her family and friends. On February 2nd, Anna made her last known phone call. The very next day, messages began arriving from her phone, raising immediate concerns. One of her close friends quickly noticed that the texts did not sound like Anna. Anna was born in 1983 in Colombia to a family that valued traditional Balkan customs. Her upbringing emphasized the importance of family, discipline, and education. Growing up, she was known for her neatness, organizational abilities, and independence, traits that remained with her throughout her life. Later, Anna moved to the United States, became a U.S. citizen. Living in here opened up new career and personal growth opportunities for her. She became fluent in English, honed her professional skills, gradually became a part of her local community. Anna always prioritized education, self-improvement. She choosing to live a quiet and unassuming life away from the public eye. In the early 2000s, Anna met David Nezovich in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Their relationship progressed quickly. They then moved in together and got married. As their personal relationship grew, they became business partners as well, founding a company focused on tech support and IT solutions. David took care of the technical aspects of the business, while Anna managed organization and long-term strategy. Eventually, they began investing in real estate, acquiring properties throughout Florida. From the outside, their life together seemed stable. They had a thriving business, a home, and a comfortable lifestyle, giving the impression of a couple on the path to financial independence. However, underlying issues were developing. Friends and acquaintances were largely unaware of the growing problems in their marriage. Over time, serious conflicts arose, including financial disagreements and deeper personal issues. By 2023, Anna and David's marriage had deteriorated to a breaking point. Those close to them reported they were in the midst of a separation, with asset division becoming the main focus. This included both their tech business and several real estate properties. Although they had not yet finalized the divorce, both were already preparing for it. Negotiations had started, disagreements emerged, and tensions were rising. With the conflict escalating, Anna chose to temporarily leave the U.S. In December 2023, she moved to Madrid, renting an apartment in the upscale Salamanca neighborhood. She explained that this move was essential for distancing herself from the stress, gaining clarity, and closing a chapter in her life. She repeatedly stated that she wasn't seeking a new relationship or distractions. Her goal was simply to regain her balance. After settling in Spain, Anna made her new place feel like home, began therapy, maintained close contact with friends, and started planning short trips across Europe. Her time in Madrid wasn't an escape. It was a way to step back from the overwhelming conflict she faced in Florida. However, just a few weeks into this new life, an unexpected event brought her independent journey to a sudden and troubling end. After moving to Madrid, Anna maintained a close friendship with her longtime friend, Sana Remo, who was living in Florida. They talked every day, despite the time difference. Their friendship had a strong foundation, and they often traveled together. Anna trusted Sana completely, often sharing her thoughts, feelings, and daily experiences with her. Their text messages showed that Anna was open about her adjustment to life in Spain. In mid-January 2024, the two friends traveled to Austria together. After their trip, they made plans to meet again in Madrid, with Sana set to arrive on February 8th. Before that, Anna had arranged a short trip to Barcelona with another friend on February 5th. They had already booked their tickets for the trip, which was not just a vacation but also included attending a conference. Anna had discussed their plans and was excited about the upcoming journey. On the evening of February 2nd, Anna had a phone call with Sana around 8:30 p.m. local time. They spoke for over an hour. Anna mentioned that she planned to stay in that night and had no plans to go out. She appeared calm and talked about her day, sharing details about errands and household chores. Their conversation ended around 10 p.m., which is the last confirmed time anyone had contact with Anna. The next morning, February 3rd, Sana received a text from Anna's number. It said, "I met an amazing man. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We're heading there. The signal might be weak. I'll call you when I return." Soon after, another message arrived. After my therapy session yesterday, I took a walk. He approached me on the street, and we instantly connected. I've never felt like this before. Sana felt something was off about the messages. She knew Anna well. She was cautious and would never leave town with a stranger without informing someone. Sana responded immediately, but there were no further replies. Her calls also went unanswered. At first, she tried to convince herself that Anna might indeed be in a place with poor reception. However, her concern quickly escalated into alarm. That same day, another friend of Anna's received similar messages. The text felt strange. The wording was flat and lacked Anna's usual style. What struck her as odd was the dialect, which sounded very different from Anna's typical speech. They mentioned that the text seemed like it had been translated from another language using an automatic translator. The theory was logical. The message sounded awkward and overly formal, which made him uncomfortable. Both Sana and Anna's friend quickly figured out that Anna hadn't written those messages herself. They compared them to their previous conversations and immediately noticed the difference. Anna's actual texts were vibrant and filled with her distinctive expressions, none of which were present in these messages. Furthermore, the content of the messages didn't match her recent actions at all. The next day, Sana did everything she could to contact Anna. She reached out to their mutual friends, tried tracking her location using apps, and even called local hospitals. However, nothing worked. Although Anna's phone was on, she did not answer. After, Sana quickly contacted the Madrid police. She explained that Anna's sudden silence was very unusual and that the messages had a tone that Anna wouldn't normally use. However, the authorities did not act right away. They viewed Anna as an adult who had the right to make her own choices, including leaving town without notifying anyone. Officially, her disappearance was not deemed suspicious. Police stated they could not start an investigation without evidence that Anna was missing against her will. They believed the unusual texts and her lack of communication were insufficient. The only definitive point they recognized was February 5th, the day Anna was supposed to travel to Barcelona. Authorities indicated that if she did not arrive at the station or reach out by that date, her absence would be considered a formal missing persons case. As a result, no significant actions were taken for 3 days after Anna stopped responding. The police did not check her phone records, search her apartment, or look into her recent activities. After Anna went missing, her friends tried hard to find her. They called and texted her repeatedly and even contacted people in Madrid, but nothing worked. On February 5th, Anna was supposed to be at the train station but didn't show up, and none of her phones were answering. It was only then that authorities officially declared her a missing person. That same day, a request was made to the court for permission to search her apartment and access her phone records. However, the request was denied by a judge due to a lack of evidence suggesting any crime had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry, loud noises, or aggressive behavior. Therefore, there was no legal basis for allowing a search or accessing her private information. Days later, when law enforcement entered Anna's apartment, they found that the door was locked from the outside. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her belongings were in order, there were no signs of a struggle, and nothing valuable was missing. However, the fact that her home was undisturbed raised serious concerns about her disappearance. It indicated that she might have either left voluntarily and never returned or that someone took her out without breaking in. Anna's brother, Felipe Henao, kept in close contact with Spanish authorities but pointed out that coordinating internationally was difficult. He shared with reporters that the investigators in Madrid had limited English proficiency and that U.S. officials had not yet provided significant assistance. He expressed worry about the lack of communication among Spanish police, the FBI, and the U.S. consulate. Despite the disappearance of a U.S. citizen under mysterious circumstances abroad, the initial days following Anna's vanishing were poorly managed. This was a critical time when they could have gathered fresh evidence, interviewed neighbors, and reviewed phone activity or camera footage. Instead, valuable time was wasted, assuming Anna left on her own. This assumption delayed a prompt response and may have impacted the investigation's course. On the 4 days later after Anna Knežević disappeared, staff at her apartment complex provided police with crucial information that changed the investigation. This information was about the night of February 2nd, which was the last time Anna had been in contact. A building administrator reported that several surveillance cameras at the entrance and along the building's facade had been disabled around 9:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before Anna stopped responding to her friend. When security personnel reviewed the recordings, they noticed that the camera lenses had been intentionally covered. The footage showed a person in dark clothing and a motorcycle helmet approaching the outdoor cameras. He spraying paint directly onto the lenses to obscure them. Afterward, he waited for someone to exit the building, which allowed him to slip inside. Once inside, he targeted the camera in the elevator area, spraying paint over its lens as well. This act appeared to be deliberate. The individual seemed to know where the surveillance devices were and how to disable them quickly, discreetly. The building staff confirmed that the security systems had been tampered with. They provided copies of the footage to Spanish investigators, which was the first visual evidence indicating possible outside interference. However, identifying the person in the video was impossible due to his helmet and dark clothing. The individual's face was completely covered, and their body type did not offer enough clues for clear identification. Nevertheless, forensic experts noted a few important details. The person's eyes, part of their forehead, and brow line were briefly visible. Investigators believe that this person planned the act meticulously. He brought spray paint and wore equipment intended to prevent leaving any traces behind. His appearance in the footage matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance, raising further suspicions. The targeting of the building's surveillance system and the disabling of specific cameras indicated that the individual was familiar with the layout of the premises, suggesting this was not a random act. It was planned and concerning. Further investigation showed that the exterior camera was spray painted in about 30 seconds, and the interior camera was disabled even more quickly. Every action taken was intentional and confident, with no sign of hesitation or looking around. This led investigators to conclude that the individual knew how long the actions would take and executed them with precision. A staff member confirmed that this man appeared on camera just as residents were leaving. He seized the opportunity to enter the building, indicating that he did not have authorized access. Without a key card or entry code, he was not recognized as a resident. He took a direct route from the entrance to the camera near the elevator, with no stops. The video footage quickly caught the attention of both law enforcement and Anna's friends. Sana, who had reached Madrid by that time, shared the video with journalists, which sparked public interest in the case. Media outlets began to speculate that the man in the helmet might be linked to Anna's disappearance, but his identity and motives remained unknown. After an image from the surveillance footage was made public, the FBI started its own analysis. They noted that even low-resolution footage could be analyzed to compare visual elements with their databases. They concentrated on key facial features that were still visible despite the helmet, such as the shape of the eyes, the space between the eyebrows, the brow ridges, and the upper facial structure. These aspects can often be recognized even when partially hidden. Public curiosity about the footage intensified when it was revealed that the paint used to disable the cameras was from a specific brand, which later appeared in other parts of the investigation. Investigators did not release this detail right away, but they found that the spray can involve match the type and packaging shown in a store surveillance footage. This footage captured a man who looked similar to someone seen at Anna's building buying the same spray can. After Anna stopped answering calls and messages, her friend Sana reached out to her husband, David Nezovich, on February 4th. During their conversation, Sana learned that David was in Florida. She proposed that they travel to Madrid together to help search for Anna, and David agreed, even discussing a specific flight from Miami for the next day. However, when the time arrived, he did not show up and later claimed to be in Serbia. This unexpected turn left Anna's friends confused. David was aware that his wife had gone missing under mysterious circumstances in a foreign country. He had the ability to fly to Spain, yet he chose to go to Serbia instead. This decision was puzzling. Instead of participating in the search, he went to a third country where his relatives live. Questions naturally arose. Why didn't he go to the location where his wife disappeared? Why didn't he join the search effort? Sana grew increasingly concerned about David's behavior. While he did not openly dismiss her, his reactions felt distant and confusing. His actions seemed illogical. Although the first few days were critical, he did not attempt to go to Madrid. He believed there was nothing he could do in Spain because he did not speak Spanish, had no place to stay, and was unfamiliar with the city. His lawyer supported this view, explaining to reporters that going to a country without any local connections would not be useful. He also mentioned that David was worried about Anna's disappearance but felt that being there in person would not make a difference. After Anna went missing, David hired a lawyer in Florida. The lawyer reported that David had been in contact with the FBI and had shared all necessary information, including credit card statements and his efforts to find legal assistance in Spain. However, none of these actions involved him participating in the search directly. Despite providing some information, David stayed distant and avoided making any public comments. After Florida police confirmed that David reported a theft in January, several questions emerged. He alleged that $5,000 in cash and personal items were stolen from his unlocked car. In the morning, he found the passenger door slightly open. Security cameras near his home did not capture the theft, and the police could not identify any suspects. Although there was no initial connection to Anna's case, the report became suspicious in light of subsequent events. David's trip to Serbia created further controversy. He asserted that he left the U.S. before Anna's disappearance and remained abroad during that time. However, Saw mentioned a phone call with him on February 4th, in which he stated he was in Florida, suggesting he might have flown to Serbia after that conversation. There was no official confirmation from border control authorities at that time. David's attorney provided his passport as evidence that he had left earlier, but these inconsistencies raised doubts and increased suspicion regarding his involvement. The situation became more complicated due to a property dispute that had intensified months before Anna disappeared. With shared assets about to be divided, suspicion was understandable. This divorce was not just ordinary, it involved significant financial stakes and joint possessions. Anna's friends noted that their relationship had turned hostile. In contrast, David and his lawyer claimed the divorce was amicable, arguing that they had simply grown apart. At that time, David had not been charged with any crime and was located outside the U.S. However, his absence during the search for Anna and inconsistencies in his statements raised concerns among investigators. While David insisted he had no involvement in Anna's disappearance, a growing list of circumstantial evidence caught the attention of both police and the FBI. In May 2024, U.S. authorities arrested David at Miami International Airport, just after he arrived on an international flight. He was taken into custody by the Diplomatic Security Service and the FBI without any issues. This was the first official action that connected him to Anna's disappearance. He faced charges related to the abduction of a U.S. citizen outside the country, based on a series of indirect but related pieces of evidence uncovered during a multinational investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence was surveillance footage collected by investigators in Spain and Serbia. At a store close to Anna's apartment in Madrid, cameras captured a man who looked like David buying a can of spray paint and duct tape. Forensic analysis showed that the spray paint was the same brand used to disable the security cameras in Anna's building, as the label and color were identical. Investigators viewed this as evidence of premeditation. Additionally, authorities tracked a rental car used by David in Serbia. GPS data indicated that the car entered Spain, traveled through Madrid, and then moved into northern Italy before returning to Serbia. The precise tracking of this route led investigators to believe that Anna's body may have been transported in that vehicle. A stop in a wooded area of northern Italy raised particular interest, prompting coordinated searches by both Italian and Spanish law enforcement. As of that time, no remains had been discovered, but the theory that Anna's body was transported remained a central focus of the investigation. A key piece of evidence came from surveillance footage in Anna's apartment building. Investigators released a video showing a man, matching David's physical description, exiting the elevator with a large suitcase on the same night Anna disappeared. Though his face was obscured, the timing and situation aligned with other findings in the investigation. Authorities suspected that the suitcase might have been used to remove Anna's body from the apartment. David's rental car, which he had picked up in Serbia, was eventually returned to the rental agency. An inspection revealed that the car's mileage had increased by over 4,800 miles. Additionally, it had been modified with tinted windows, which were not part of the original rental terms. These changes raised suspicions. Investigators also found that the car was operating with false license plates during a time it was believed to have been used for cross-border travel. Spanish police recorded a sighting of a similar vehicle near the location where Ana disappeared, but they could not identify the driver because of the tinted windows and fake plates. The FBI linked several crucial pieces of evidence: the purchase of materials, disruptions to surveillance systems, the travel route, elevator footage showing a suitcase, and modifications to a car. Their report indicated that all the evidence suggested a planned criminal act and an effort to conceal it. The official statement referred to the case as the abduction of a U.S. citizen abroad, involving a U.S. national. Although no body was found, authorities believed the evidence was strong enough to justify an arrest. David was taken to a federal detention center in South Florida. His lawyers claimed he had cooperated with authorities, willingly shared information, and did not plan to escape. However, prosecutors contended that the substantial circumstantial evidence and the case's context created a significant risk that he might flee. David's arrest was a pivotal moment in the investigation. Until then, he had evaded authorities and avoided speaking publicly. Now, he was the focus of a federal case. The next step was to decide if he would remain in custody until the trial. After his arrest in Miami, David's first court appearance centered on his request for bail. The judge denied the request, citing a high risk of flight, and noted that the actions surrounding Ana's disappearance seemed well-planned and executed. The judge highlighted the planning and sophistication as reasons for keeping David in detention. David's legal team appealed the decision, arguing that he posed no danger and did not intend to flee. They proposed a substantial bail amount, an ankle monitor, a travel ban, and home confinement. The defense emphasized David's long-term residence in the U.S., his clean record, and his willingness to cooperate with authorities. However, the court stood. The defense's main argument was that David could not have been in Spain when Ana disappeared. His lawyer presented passport stamps and travel records to show he arrived in Serbia well before February 2nd, claiming that David physically could not have been in Madrid at the time of the incident. The lawyer also noted that David did not speak Spanish, had no ties or residence in Spain, which would have made it difficult for him to plan such an act. Prosecutors were firmly opposed to the defense's claims. They pointed out that David's travels across Europe closely matched the timeline of Ana's disappearance. The evidence included the rental car's route, purchases of specific items, and other activities that suggested he had premeditated the act. Although there was no direct evidence, the prosecution insisted that the strong circumstantial evidence pointed to his involvement. To bolster their case, they presented the court with message transcripts, surveillance footage, phone records, and an analysis of David's behavior. It was argued that some of David's actions could not be mere coincidences. The judge acknowledged that the prosecution had built a substantial body of circumstantial evidence that created a convincing narrative. Although Ana's body had not been found, the evidence indicated that her disappearance involved aggressive intent and likely implicated David specifically. The judge addressed the defense's claim that the evidence was inadequate by clarifying that the requirement for bail is not beyond a reasonable doubt, but preponderance of the evidence. This means the court does not need absolute proof of guilt, only a significant likelihood of risk, like the chance of fleeing or obstructing the investigation. Therefore, the court chose to keep David in custody. His legal team announced they would appeal the bail denial and have filed a formal complaint with the district court, which can review the decisions of lower courts. As the main trial was approaching, David stayed in federal custody. The trial was expected to be lengthy, including expert testimony and international collaboration, and was likely to receive significant media coverage. Investigators began focusing on a woman, identified by the FBI, who might have helped create the suspicious text messages that seemed to come from Ana on February 3rd. This woman, fluent in Spanish, had previously interacted with David via a dating app. The texts sent from Ana's phone were in Spanish and did not match her usual writing style. As mentioned earlier, her close friends quickly noticed that the phrasing resembled a machine translation, a viewpoint later confirmed by linguistic forensic analysis. The defense maintained that there was no direct evidence linking David to the crime. His attorneys highlighted that no one had seen him at Anna's apartment, and there was no evidence of contact between them on the day she went missing. They also questioned the reliability of surveillance footage that showed a man with a suitcase, arguing that it could depict someone else, as the resemblance was not conclusive. Additionally, they emphasized that there had been no official confirmation of Anna's death through forensic evidence. On April 28, 2025, it was reported that David Nezovich, who had been charged with the abduction and presumed death of his wife, Anna, was found dead in his cell at a federal detention center in Miami. His attorneys stated that he took his own life, and no suicide note was discovered. At the time of his death, he had been held without bail while awaiting trial. Anna's family expressed deep sadness and frustration over the situation. Since the trial did not take place, Anna's whereabouts remain unknown. Her loved ones believe that David took the answers about what really happened on the night she disappeared with him. Shannon Graves was born on November 4, 1988, in Ohio, USA. She was raised by her mother, a single mother. Everything changed when her mother met Ronnie DePaul, who became a father figure in her life. Ronnie treats her like his own daughter, and she quickly takes a liking to him. She was known for her kind heart and loving nature. In 2016, Shannon proudly earned her cosmetology license, marking a new beginning after a challenging childhood. Her friends affectionately called her Star, recognizing her free spirit, honesty, and selflessness. However, Shannon's compassionate nature sometimes led her to make poor choices in relationships. Following her mother's death, she struggled with substance abuse. Her close friends observed that she often fell for the wrong men, whether due to bad luck or her attraction to rebellious personalities. Despite these challenges, Shannon was determined to take control of her life. Her professional achievements filled her with hope for a brighter future. Unfortunately, Shannon's intuition was wrong when she became involved with Arturo Novoa. He is of Puerto Rican descent, charming and passionate about music, but he is also very secretive about his life. This secrecy likely stemmed from his lengthy criminal history, which began in 2004 with arrests for assault and property damage. A few months later, he faced charges of escaping from prison and obstructing public service. In 2006, he was charged with felony fleeing after a police chase, followed by aggravated arson charges. After serving his prison term, he was arrested again for trespassing in 2008 after being evicted from his residence. In 2010, he faced additional charges related to weapons and unlawful entry. Court records indicate that he was a man addicted to criminal activity and made a living by illegal means. When Shannon and Arturo began dating in the summer of 2016, everything seemed to be going well. She introduced him to her family and started spending more time at his home. That same year, she got a puppy, which brought her joy and companionship. During the holiday season, she celebrated with her family, enjoying food, laughter, and gift exchanges. This gathering would unknowingly be the last time the family would be together. 2 months later, while with Arturo, Shannon briefly encountered her sister, Debbie DePaul. They discussed Debbie's upcoming birthday in March, for which Shannon was already making plans. However, when the day came, she did not attend, an unusual absence. Initially, her family thought she was just busy and would arrive later, but she never came. Alarmingly, she did not call or send a message, not even to wish Debbie a happy birthday. When she also missed the Easter gathering the following month, concern grew. As time passed, her family's anxiety increased. After calling and texting several times without receiving a response, Ronnie attempted to contact Arturo. He claimed that he and Shannon had broken up and that she had moved to Cleveland with someone else. However, when Ronnie and Debbie tried to contact her directly, they were unsuccessful. Determined to find her, they went to her apartment, but found no clues. Her car and phone were there, but her beloved dog was missing. Around this time, Arturo was arrested on charges related to banned substances. In the following weeks, Shannon's family was engulfed in fear and uncertainty. In June, Debbie officially reported her as a missing person to the police. In their report, family members acknowledged Shannon's past struggles with addiction but highlighted that she had never gone this long without contacting them. Authorities requested anyone with information to come forward while they searched hospitals and jails, but there was still no trace of Shannon. Investigators found tracking her whereabouts to be extremely challenging, especially since she had been missing for months. They filed a request for her phone records and began looking into her personal life, noting that she often spent long periods of time with her boyfriend, Arturo, before her disappearance. The police subsequently interviewed Arturo. He recounted the same story he had told Ronnie, adding complexity to the case. Without a clear timeline for Shannon's disappearance, they could not confirm Arturo's alibi. Additionally, there was no evidence of a new boyfriend with whom Shannon had supposedly moved in. As suspicions rose, detectives learned about an ex-boyfriend named John, and considering this lead, they decided to investigate him further. John, a business owner, had a criminal past involving trafficking of banned substances. His incarceration had led to his breakup with Shannon, as her friends remembered how distressed she was upon learning of his conviction. Complicating matters, John had been released from prison shortly before Shannon was reported missing. When police found and interviewed him, he claimed he hadn't seen her since February, when she mentioned getting back together with Arturo. His statement implied that her relationship with Arturo may not have been as perfect as it seemed. Still, John admitted that he had lingering feelings for her at the time of their last conversation. With two potential suspects but no clear evidence, police were having a hard time getting their case off the ground. When Shannon's phone records were finally released, investigators hoped to glean vital information. Unfortunately, these records only confirmed that she had gone to work as usual in late February before her phone was suddenly turned off. The number had since been reassigned to someone else, and around that same time, all activity on her credit cards also came to a halt. The investigators had no idea that the answer to the case was about to emerge, but in the most frightening way. On July 30th, a man from Youngstown called 911 to report a shocking discovery. He told the operator that he had found human remains inside black garbage bags, and most disturbingly, the head was missing. Upon receiving the signal, rescue workers notified the police, who quickly arrived at the home of the caller, Kenny Eschenbaugh, and his wife, Jill. While forensic experts investigated the remains, Kenny and Jill were brought in for questioning. According to their testimony, the freezer containing the body parts belonged to a friend. A week prior, this friend had asked Kenny and Jill to store it in their basement, claiming it was filled with meat he didn't want to spoil. On July 29th, Jill decided to cook spaghetti and meatballs for dinner and thought she could use some meat from the freezer, planning to replace it later. However, when she approached the freezer, she found it locked. Assuming their friend was just being eccentric, she used a screwdriver to pry it open. To her horror, instead of meat, she found bags filled with what turned out to be human remains. Feeling nauseated, she quickly shut the freezer and called for Kenny. Together, they cautiously opened one of the bags and discovered a human foot. Since Kenny and Jill's stories matched perfectly when questioned separately, they were quickly ruled out as suspects. Investigators then turned their attention to the friend who had left the freezer in their home, named Anthony Gonzalez. Kenny explained that he had met Anthony 4 years earlier through a mutual friend, bonding over their shared interest in music. Although they hung out occasionally, Kenny found Anthony to be unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. Despite being cooperative, the identity of the victim remained a mystery until forensic experts discovered a scorpion tattoo on one of the feet, matching a tattoo belonging to Shannon, a woman who had recently disappeared. While more tests were planned, it increasingly appeared that the remains belonged to her. This left investigators with a concerning question: how and when was Shannon placed in the freezer? Shortly afterward, the lead prosecutor in Ohio held a press conference to discuss this chilling case, which was rapidly becoming one of the most disturbing in recent history. Although the medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death without the victim's head, Shannon was positively identified through fingerprint analysis. Her family was heartbroken to learn the truth about their beloved daughter, discovering that her fate was far worse than they had ever imagined. Shannon's family and friends gathered in a local park for a candlelight vigil to remember her. Debbie, one of the attendees, told reporters that she believed Shannon has found peace. The vigil was intended to celebrate Shannon's life rather than to focus on sadness. Many people lit candles and released lanterns while wearing shirts with messages honoring Shannon. However, Shannon's family was visibly pained. Ronnie, too devastated to appear on camera, shared his indescribable grief, explaining that he loved Shannon as a daughter and sought justice for her. In the meantime, investigators ramped up the search for Anthony. They soon discovered that Anthony Gonzalez was just an alias. His real name matched the identity of someone they had already suspected, Arturo Novoa. Authorities learned that Arturo had been dating a woman named Katrina Layton, who moved into his house shortly after Shannon was last seen. Given Arturo's lengthy criminal history, the police acted quickly, arresting both him and Katrina and searching their home. The police found red stains on the walls, a knife, and a manual for the freezer where Shannon's remains were located. Kenny, who previously believed his friend's name was Anthony, was shocked to learn Arturo's true identity. He wasn't the only one confused. Arturo often used different names, possibly to conceal his past involving activities related to banned substances. During questioning, Arturo remained composed, repeatedly denying any connection to Shannon's death and claiming ignorance about her whereabouts. He also distanced himself from the freezer. Katrina supported his claims, but their story began to unravel when police discovered a key among her belongings that fit the freezer's lock, linking them to the crime and ensuring they remained in custody. As the investigation continued, Shannon's ex-boyfriend John played a crucial role in uncovering additional information. He spoke to Shannon's friends and learned about a bonfire attended by Arturo. A witness reported that Arturo used the fire to burn personal items and, when questioned, he claimed they were Shannon's clothes, which he burned as revenge for alleged infidelity. That night, he was with his friend Andrew Herman, and they both continued to burn clothing. Investigators later searched the bonfire site and found remnants, including a bracelet that belonged to Shannon. As the investigation progressed, authorities contacted a woman named Jamie, who knew Andrew and his wife, Michelle Eilenfeld. Jamie reveals that Arturo and Katrina were behind Shannon's murder, while Andrew helped handling the body of her body. Jamie stated that Katrina had harbored jealousy towards Shannon for a long time, and that Shannon felt the same way about her. The situation became more complicated when neighbors reported seeing Katrina walking Shannon's dog and using her credit card to make small purchases, suggesting that Katrina had taken over a part of her life. Amid these incidents, Ronnie passed away unexpectedly without witnessing justice. Debbie, overwhelmed with sorrow, sought therapy while caring for her younger brother and Shannon's cherished dog. Meanwhile, Andrew and Michelle were placed in pretrial detention. Authorities gathered a wealth of evidence that Michelle had threatened witnesses, interfered with the investigation, and covered up the crime. As the case went to the jury, the truth of what happened became clearer. On February 24, 2017, Arturo killed Shannon, likely with Katrina present. He later called Andrew to assist him in handling the body. They disposed of her head, stored other body parts in their freezer, and discarded some remains in an undisclosed location that authorities have yet to find. The prosecutor stated that Arturo was merely a small-time dealer of banned substances, acting out of jealousy over Shannon's finances. Katrina, on the other hand, wanted Shannon to keep her distance so she could pursue a relationship with Arturo. Facing the death penalty, the four defendants ultimately accepted plea deals. Arturo Novoa received a life sentence for murdering Shannon. Katrina Layton was sentenced to 18 years, Andrew Herman to 12 years, and Michelle Eilenfeld to 2 years. Arturo attempted to appeal his sentence, but it was upheld. To keep the memory of Shannon alive, Debbie created a social media page dedicated to her younger sister, where she frequently shares pictures of her pet dog. She frequently visits Shannon's grave, where she has established a special ritual. After cutting the grass, Debbie spray paints a large pink heart next to the headstone, which was Shannon's favorite color. In a local interview a few years later, Debbie recalled the devastating call she received about the partial discovery of Shannon's remains. Currently, the investigators who helped convict Arturo are still searching for the missing parts of Shannon's remains. Debbie remains hopeful that they will be found someday as she continues to honor her sister's memory through her dedicated online tribute. On a cold February afternoon in Wenatchee, Washington, 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell stepped outside from her beauty school for a break, but she didn't inform anyone of her absence plan. She vanished without a trace. Hours later, her locked car was discovered in a secluded canyon away from town. There was only one set of footprints leading away into the snow. No one knew her whereabouts or what had occurred. What began as a missing person investigation quickly escalated into a more troubling situation. In the quiet town of Wenatchee, Washington, 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell was recognized as a lively and dedicated young woman with a promising future. She managed her time between the homes of her divorced parents while preparing for high school graduation. In addition to her academic responsibilities, Mackenzie was also pursuing her dream of becoming a hairstylist by attending the Academy of Hair Design. Her life was busy, filled with early mornings, long days, and evenings spent dancing with her school's performance group, the Applettes, or participating in local modeling events. Mackenzie had faced challenges, including years of bullying because of her prominent underbite, which she hoped to correct with surgery. Nevertheless, she approached life with resilience. Her growing self-confidence was admired by both friends and family. Her father, Reed Cowell, often praised her relentless drive and determination. Her each day began before sunrise and extended well into the night. At that time, Mackenzie was in a close relationship with Joaquin Villazano, and they were nearly inseparable. Everything seemed to be going well until the events of February 9, 2010, changed everything. That evening, Mackenzie planned to have dinner with her father. It was meant to be a rare break in her busy schedule. When she didn't call after school, as she usually did, Reed quickly became worried. By 8 p.m., just as the family was about to report her missing, the police called first. They had found Mackenzie's car, a 2000 Pontiac Grand Prix, abandoned near Mission Ridge, about 40 miles from her home in Orondo. The surroundings were dark, isolated, and covered in snow. The car was locked. Cowell's wallet and some of her clothes were found in the car, although her debit card and mobile phone were missing. Only a pair of footprints were found at the scene, according to police, indicating that she had been alone when it was left there. The search for Mackenzie started right away. Bloodhounds, helicopters, and volunteers searched the steep and rugged area near where her car was discovered, but they found no clues. Although her case was classified as a missing person case with a risk of death, it did not initiate an Amber Alert. However, the local community and soon the entire nation became aware of her disappearance. Mackenzie's face was featured on news channels, and the FBI sent agents to assist local detectives. Everyone was eager for answers, but the situation was confusing. Mackenzie had never run away before. She was well-liked, responsible, and had strong ties to her family and community. At approximately 3 p.m. on February 9, 2010, she was last seen on surveillance video leaving the Hair Design Academy, walking to her car, and driving away. She told her classmates that she would be back in less than 15 minutes. Around this time, she sent a text message to her boyfriend saying, "Hey, what's up?" This was the last time she was known to have used her phone. After that, there was no further communication from her, making that text the last digital trace of her. Her debit card remained unused in the days that followed. Witnesses soon began to report their observations. Several residents near Mission Ridge stated they saw a tall, slim man with dark hair wearing a long coat walking alone around the time when Mackenzie's car was believed to have been abandoned, between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. The police then focused on Mackenzie's phone records, examining thousands of messages, calls, and social media activities from platforms like Facebook and MySpace. However, despite the large amount of information, they could not find a clear lead. Detectives did not consider it a runaway case. For 3 days, her family, friends, and investigators remained hopeful, distributing flyers, searching the area where her abandoned car was found, and pursuing every potential lead. However, their hope turned to heartbreak. On the afternoon of February 13th, Mackenzie's body was discovered by a passerby on the banks of the Columbia River near Quincy, Washington, in a resort community about 32 kilometers from Wenatchee. She was found fully clothed, with her feet in the water. A vacant home for sale is located about 46 meters from where her body was found. The scene was eerie and unsettling. While authorities kept many details secret, what was revealed was alarming. Mackenzie had been beaten, stabbed, and strangled. There were no banned substance or alcohol in her system. Although she had not been abused, there was an attempt to dismember her after death. Her arm was partially cut off, and a serrated knife was found in her shoulder. Nearby, duct tape was discovered on the ground. Dive teams returned to search the riverbank, expanding their efforts to neighboring counties to gather clues. Detectives acknowledged they had no clear suspects. Mackenzie could have been targeted by someone she knew or by a stranger. Her death shocked the community. As news spread through schools and neighborhoods, about 1,800 people attended Cowell's memorial service, which was held at the Toyota Town Center in Wenatchee on February 25th. The FBI increased its involvement in the case by forming a special task force. Investigators began their inquiry by interviewing people close to Mackenzie, including her boyfriend, Joaquin Villazano, and her mother's boyfriend, Joey Fisher. Although Joey appeared distressed and reportedly failed a lie detector test. It was noted that Joey had an argument with Mackenzie the day before her disappearance, but there was no evidence linking him to her death. Then, both Joaquin and Joey were later completely cleared by the police. As time passed, detectives pursued numerous leads. One notable tip came from Liz Reed, who is a college student, police informant, and former drug lord. Reed told the police that 2 banned substance lords, Sam Cuevas and Emmanuel Serros, had killed Mackenzie in a case of mistaken identity. The 2 men reportedly believed that Mackenzie was a banned substance lord. Reed claimed that she had seen a snuff film about the murder, and Cuevas admitted to her that he choked Mackenzie to keep her quiet. Reed was able to describe the murder weapon before it was made public and provided the police with a ring that she claimed belonged to Mackenzie. She stated that Serros had sent her to the murder scene to find the ring. None of the Cowell family members recognized the ring as belonging to Mackenzie. Reed later retracted her claim. As a result, the police began to doubt Reed's credibility. Cuevas and Serros were questioned by the police and presented alibis, witness statements, and phone records showing that they were elsewhere on the day Mackenzie went missing. After encountering this setback, investigators continued their work. They pursued over 750 tips and conducted more than 800 interviews, collecting DNA samples from dozens of individuals. Despite their efforts, they were unable to identify the person responsible. For several months, Mackenzie's mother chose to stay silent out of respect for the ongoing investigation. However, as time passed without any leads, she felt compelled to go public, urging anyone with information, no matter how trivial it might seem, to come forward. The case took a new direction when a fresh informant stepped forward. After receiving some information, police began focusing their investigation on Christopher Scott Wilson. Christopher had previously attacked a woman at a party, choking her violently for no reason before acting as if nothing had occurred. At 29 years old, Christopher had attended the same hair design academy as Mackenzie and lived just a few blocks away from it. Those who knew him described Christopher as quiet and polite, but also strange. Simultaneously, police received a letter in August claiming that Christopher had an obsession with death, corpses, and serial killers. One of his schoolmates told police that Christopher had said he used to work at funeral homes and that he liked cutting people up, which raised concerns in light of the violent details surrounding Mackenzie's murder. One mentioned that he bragged about cutting people up while handling bodies, and another remembered him claiming he had strangled someone with a belt during a hotel encounter. Despite these alarming stories, those close to him defended him. His mother argued that being different did not make her son dangerous, while his best friend described him as kind and generous, suggesting he was simply misunderstood. Christopher stood out for more reasons than just his looks. He was at the academy on the same day Mackenzie vanished and left through the same back door just 2 minutes after her. After that, it became difficult to track his movements. He did send a few texts to his ex-girlfriend, but nobody could confirm his location that afternoon. He had no prior criminal record, and when the police questioned him, he claimed he didn't know Mackenzie at all. He even agreed to give a DNA sample, which turned out to be a major mistake. DNA from duct tape found near Mackenzie's body matched Christopher. When faced with the DNA match and questioned about his presence in the area, Christopher completely denied being there. Upon learning that his DNA was found at the crime scene, he asked for a lawyer, and the interview concluded. Investigators found it significant that Christopher was obsessed with Dexter, a fictional character known for dismembering his victims, which mirrored the injuries on Mackenzie's body. Along with the DNA evidence and the odd timing of when he left the academy, this provided enough reason to arrest him. After 8 months of uncertainty, police arrested Christopher Wilson. Although he had no connection to Mackenzie other than being classmates and had attended her memorial service to support friends, he was now in custody, charged with her murder. As detectives investigated his apartment and devices, the case took a more disturbing turn. A large discolored stain on the carpet was found to be Mackenzie's blood, contradicting Christopher's assertion that it was just spilled water. Authorities confirmed she had been killed in his home, but how she ended up there was still unclear. Mackenzie's father maintained that his daughter would never go anywhere with someone she didn't trust. Did she have more interactions with Christopher at school than anyone suspected? Was she manipulated or forced? No one could definitively answer these questions. On October 6th, Christopher was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder and taken into custody on a $1 million bond. He pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. His court appearance attracted a very emotional crowd. His mother was in tears as he walked in, and many of his supporters firmly believed he was innocent. Among them were young women who had known Christopher personally and found it hard to accept that he could commit such a violent act. However, Mackenzie's friends and family felt that the doubts about Christopher's guilt were a painful reminder of the tragedy they faced. A close friend of Mackenzie emphasized to the public that Mackenzie was the real victim. She did not choose to be abducted, murdered, and thrown away by the Columbia River. She was a lively teenager with a bright future ahead of her. In December, the Cowell Task Force made a second arrest. Wilson's friend Tessa M. Schuleman was accused, but never charged, of helping Wilson cover up the crime. Instead, she was charged with obstruction of justice in an unrelated case. Detectives claimed that there were multiple photos found on Christopher's computer of Schuleman posing as a dead person at the spot in Christopher's apartment where Cowell's blood was found. Schuleman claimed that she did not know about the blood and that Christopher had told her to pose there. Investigators continued their work by submitting additional evidence to the lab and interviewing people connected to Christopher. However, they struggled to identify a motive for the crime. Some individuals involved in the case speculated that Mackenzie had been an easy target for someone mentally unstable. As the legal proceedings intensified, Christopher's defense team, led by prominent attorney John Henry Brown, previously associated with the notorious Ted Bundy, took aggressive measures to exclude critical evidence from the trial. Eventually, a judge decided that prosecutors could not present information about Wilson's work at local funeral homes or mention his Hannibal Lecter tattoo. The defense also introduced conspiracy theories, claiming that law enforcement had planted Mackenzie's blood in Wilson's apartment. They revisited a previous theory that implicated two men, Sam and Emmanuel, who had been accused by informant Liz Reed. Christopher's mother supported these theories, believing her son had been wrongfully accused. The defense pointed out that there was no DNA evidence connecting Christopher to Mackenzie's car or the knife found with her body. They also cast doubt on the authenticity of a ring that Liz claimed belonged to Mackenzie, noting the poor quality of the photos and that Mackenzie's family and friends did not recognize it. Nevertheless, the prosecutors grew more confident in their case. Christopher's charges were elevated to first-degree murder because they believed Mackenzie's death was planned. If found guilty, he could face up to 26 years in prison. In April 2011, a plea deal was offered to Christopher, a 6-year sentence for manslaughter. Initially, he declined the offer, insisting that he was innocent. Many were surprised by his decision since the evidence against him was strong and the plea deal seemed quite generous. As the trial date neared, Christopher changed his mind and wanted to accept the plea deal, citing jury survey results that indicated he might not get a fair trial. However, by then, the 6-year offer was no longer available. Mackenzie's family also asked Christopher to write a formal statement acknowledging his actions. In court, he read aloud, "He also recklessly caused the death of Mackenzie Cowell by strangulation and by stabbing her with a knife." When asked if this statement was true, he replied, "Yes." Despite this, he later claimed that his statement was false, stating he had only agreed to it to secure a plea deal. He continued to assert that he had been framed. Wilson ultimately pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, first-degree robbery for stealing Mackenzie's phone, and assault in a different case. In May 2012, he was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison but received credit for the time he had already served. After the hearing, in a heartfelt moment, the families of Mackenzie and Wilson embraced and exchanged apologies, showing a rare moment of compassion amidst the heartbreak of the case. Later, Christopher Scott Wilson tried to withdraw his guilty plea through the Washington Court of Appeals, but his appeal was unsuccessful. After serving 11.5 years, he was released from the Monroe Correctional Center on December 11, 2023 at the age of 43. Mackenzie Cowell, however, never lived past 17. In her short life, she left behind a legacy of determination, kindness, and ambition. Her bedroom remains nearly untouched, serving as a quiet tribute to the life she was creating. Her father, Reed Cowell, has placed a wind chime outside their home. When it jingles in the breeze, he feels as if he is hearing his daughter speak again. Mackenzie was his special gift from God, he says. Mackenzie will never leave his heart. At 3 a.m., police knocked on the door of a quiet apartment in Houston. Inside, Leon Jacob and Valerie McDaniel thought their troubles were resolved. However, when Valerie opened the door, instead of finding relief, she was met with handcuffs. 2 people were missing, and it was believed they were dead. Now, they at the center of this situation had to confront the reality of what had happened. Unbeknownst to them, everything had been a setup. This story revolves around deception, manipulation, and a plan that spiraled out of control, ultimately leading to a dramatic downfall. Leon Jacob had always dreamed of becoming a doctor and saving lives, but the reality was much darker. His medical career was marked by unfinished residencies, disciplinary actions, and a series of failures. His personal life was equally troubled. Leon married Annie Morrison in 2001. She was ambitious, smart, but their home life was chaotic. They moved to New York to advance their careers, Annie in law and Leon in medicine, but what should have been a time for growth turned into a nightmare. Verbal abuse quickly escalated to physical violence. Leon hid his actions well, bruises were concealed and threats were spoken softly. By the time their second son was born, Annie lived in a constant state of fear. Leon's anger was uncontrollable. He drank heavily, gambled irresponsibly, and manipulated Annie through psychological abuse and terrifying threats. During one violent confrontation, he even pulled a knife on her in front of their child. On another occasion, Leon locked Annie and their baby in a room, telling her that the only way out was in a plastic bag. Annie finally spoke up. With her parents' assistance, she escaped with her children to Chicago. However, Leon did not give up. He stalked Annie and her family, expressing anger towards the court that gave her custody. Unable to control her, he shifted his attention to someone new, Megan Varikas. Megan worked at a hotel in Pittsburgh, where Leon had moved for his 6th residency. Like his previous positions, this one ended poorly due to his aggressive behavior towards staff and neglect of patient safety. Despite this, Megan was initially taken in by his charm. They relocated to Houston in late 2014, hoping for a new beginning, but Leon remained unchanged. By 2017, their relationship had deteriorated into threats, harassment, and fear. Megan faced physical abuse, constant stalking. When she attempted to leave, he followed her. When she sought refuge, he tracked her down. Even when she found safety at work, he would lurk outside, hiding in the bushes and confronting her coworkers. He bombarded her with emails filled with a mix of desperate requests and angry outbursts. He was unwilling to let her go and refused to accept her rejection. Megan applied for a restraining order and also sued Leon for harassment and assault. Facing criminal charges, Leon panicked as his dream of becoming a doctor slipped further away. Instead of accepting responsibility for his actions, Leon started to plan something more sinister. He reached out to a family connection and visited a law firm run by friends of his parents, where he met Laura, the owner's niece. Laura attempted to mediate the situation, hoping to persuade Megan to drop the charges and reconcile, but Megan refused. This rejection triggered Leon's dark thoughts. He considered that Laura helped Megan disappear. When Laura sensed his disturbing intention, she quickly distanced herself from him. Leon, feeling rejected, began sending Laura numerous messages and harassing her at her workplace. Although Laura felt unsafe, she did not report him to the police. Instead, she contacted her friend, seeking his help to intervene. Leon continued to stand his ground. A month went by without any progress. When Laura tried to reach her friend again, a stranger named Zach picked up the phone. He informed her that her friend had passed away unexpectedly. Zach, a former soldier, mentioned that he was familiar with the situation and offered his assistance. This new relationship would soon make a significant impact. Leon's personal life took an unexpected turn when he started dating Valerie McDaniel, a well-regarded veterinarian from Houston and a neighbor of his mother. Valerie, known for her compassion and passion for animals, had a successful career running the Montrose Veterinary Clinic since 2000. However, her personal life had been marked by deceit. She had previously been happily married to Mac, whom she met in college. In 2008, they adopted a baby girl after facing infertility challenges. Unfortunately, their family life fell apart when a woman unexpectedly contacted Valerie, claiming to be Mac's mistress and revealing years of his infidelity. Despite Mac's pleas for forgiveness, the cheating continued. Valerie eventually filed for divorce in 2014. After a lengthy and expensive legal battle, they finalized the divorce in 2016, which included her buying out Mac's share of the clinic for over $1 million. After becoming single and raising her daughter, Valerie decided to move to an upscale neighborhood in Houston. There, she met Leon, a charming, attractive man who was 8 years younger and worked as a doctor. At 48 years old and seeking stability, Valerie found herself attracted to him, even though she noticed some troubling signs. Not everyone supported their relationship. Friends cautioned her about Leon's arrogance. Her ex-husband Mac grew increasingly worried when he learned that Leon had been arrested for assault, especially since their daughter was now spending time at Valerie's house. This concern led to tension between Valerie and Mac. Valerie had assured Mac that Leon would not be present during their daughter's visits, but she broke that promise. Leon continued to come in Valerie's home, ignoring the warnings and boundaries set by others. As Leon's time to face her lawsuit approaches, he received a call from Zach. Leon saw this as an opportunity. Zach, who described himself as a former soldier, appeared to be the ideal person to help with what Leon considered a solution. Leon wanted Megan out of the way before the trial. If she is unwilling to leave the state on her own, it would be best for her to go back to Pittsburgh. Without hesitation, Leon offered Zach money and gave him a $2,500 down payment during a meeting in early February. However, Zach, whose real name was Modaz Azza, had no intention of harming anyone. Instead, He viewed this as a chance to prevent a potential tragedy and decided to trick Leon. He told Leon that the job was completed, claimed that Megan had been taken and convinced not to testify. Leon wanted to talk to her, but Zach advised against it, insisting she was emotionally unstable. For now, Leon accepted this and waited until Megan arrived at court. When she did, Leon lost his temper, while Zach pretended not to know what was going on. To keep up the act, Zach created a new plan. This one involved pretending to cause a car accident and planting banned substance to damage Megan's reputation before the trial. Leon agreed once more and continued to pay Zach, but the plan didn't succeed. Zach claimed that his team, whom he had supposedly hired, had been arrested. In reality, there was no team and no plan, it was all a deception. By the time Zach vanished, Leon had given him a total of $9,000. During a later court hearing, Zach admitted that he never called the police because he feared they wouldn't believe him. Given his previous theft conviction and a suspended sentence, he worried that his testimony would not be taken seriously, especially against someone like Leon Jacob, who was still a respected doctor. Feeling frustrated and betrayed, Leon looked for help elsewhere. He reached out to a prominent Houston city councilman and bail bondsman, Michael Kubosh, who had previously helped post bail for Zach. However, when Leon rushed into Michael's office demanding Zach's phone number, the discussion quickly changed direction. Leon was forceful and persistent. He accused Zach of disappearing with a large sum of money. Confused, Michael asked for more details. That's when Leon disclosed a shocking fact: he wanted Megan removed from Houston and taken off the witness list for good. Michael felt a surge of panic. He quickly reached out to the police. Authorities acted swiftly and tracked down Zach, discovering that his real name was Motaz. After his arrest, Motaz told detectives that he had been deceiving Leon to prevent a real crime from occurring. He claimed his actions were part of a scheme to protect Megan while also earning money. However, a crucial question remained: if he genuinely wanted to protect Megan, why didn't he contact the police earlier? After months of manipulation, deceit, and escalating threats, Motaz, previously known as Zach, decided to involve law enforcement. He agreed to cooperate with detectives in a high-stakes undercover operation aimed at capturing Leon Jacob in the act. The goal was to obtain recorded evidence of Leon ordering a hit. Detective Javier was selected to impersonate the hitman. During a wiretapped conversation, Zach informed Leon that he wasn't the suitable candidate for the job, but he had someone else in mind. Leon acted quickly. He was not only focused on Megan but also had another target in mind. He asked if Javier could take care of two assignments, the second being Valerie McDaniel's ex-husband, Mac. Both Leon and Valerie consented. Mac needed to be eliminated. On March 8, 2017, four individuals, Leon, Valerie, Zach, and undercover officer Javier, gathered at an Olive Garden restaurant. This meeting was intended to be a planning session, but it was actually being recorded. Leon expressed his thoughts regarding their situation. He indicated that he did not want to kill Megan but just wanted her to leave Houston and made her too scared to testify. However, he mentioned that if she refused to leave, he was open to taking extreme actions. He even suggested using an injection to make it look like she had a heart attack. Valerie, who was sitting next to him, didn't react negatively. Instead, she shared Mac's location and proposed a plan to hijack his car while he was inside, making it look like a robbery that went wrong. She was concerned that Mac would seek full custody of their daughter. Unbeknownst to the perpetrators, their intended targets were already informed about the operation. 2 weeks prior to the meeting, police warned Megan that her life was at risk. She initially sought refuge at her parents' house but later chose to return and assist with the investigation. Mac received the same warning and request for help. Together, they became part of their own crime scene. The police staged photos to create a convincing illusion. Megan was shown bound and gagged, her eyes wide with fear, while Mac was depicted with a fake gunshot wound, slumped on the ground and in his car. These images would serve as a crucial trap for Leon and Valerie. On March 9th, Detective Javier showed Leon and Valerie photos of Mac's lifeless body. Leon examined the images closely, while Valerie nodded in agreement. They both looked satisfied with what they saw. Later that day, Javier presented a second set of images showing Megan, who appeared to be kidnapped and frightened. She would later share that, at that moment, while she was tied up and surrounded by officers posing for fake crime scene photos, she couldn't hold back her tears. The distinction between fiction and reality had blurred significantly. Javier informed Leon that Megan needed to be killed. Leon didn't dispute this. Then, early in the morning on March 10th at 3 a.m., police officers knocked on Valerie's door with the unfortunate news Megan and Mac were dead. This was a test. Leon and Valerie had failed miserably. They pretended to be shocked. Leon quickly asserted that they had stayed home all night, offering an unsolicited alibi. The detectives, fully aware of the elaborate setup, observed their reaction. It was done. They had the recordings, the photos, the lies, and now they had the evidence. Leon Jacob, who was eager to restore his reputation, created a plan that ultimately led to his downfall. Valerie McDaniel, a highly regarded veterinarian, collaborated with him on a scheme that shocked even experienced investigators. Just hours after thinking their plan had worked, Leon Jacob and Valerie McDaniel were arrested. The police revealed the shocking truth: no one had died. Mac and Megan were safe, the photos were fake, and the assassination never took place. Leon went from disbelief to panic in an instant. Valerie, shocked and speechless, found herself confronted by Mac, who was waiting just outside her apartment during the arrest. She had to look into the eyes of the man she had desperately tried to forget. Meanwhile, their daughter was sleeping inside. That same night, the little girl was taken into Mac's care. It would be the last time Valerie would see her child. Leon and Valerie were both taken to jail. Because of his previous charges, Leon was not granted bail. Valerie was released to await her trial under supervision, but she would never actually appear in court. On March 27, 2017, just weeks after her arrest, Valerie McDaniel jumped from the 7th floor of her apartment building. She left behind a legacy filled with grief and confusion, as well as a voice memo on her iPad. In the memo, she expressed her apologies and emphasized that she never intended to hurt anyone. Despite the circumstances, her patients and friends remembered her fondly, as a respected veterinarian, but caring mother, a woman who ultimately lost her way and all that she had worked for. Leon was not permitted to attend her funeral. His trial began nearly a year later, in March 2018. In court, Leon's defense team attempted to place all the blame on Valerie. They portrayed him as a man struggling with untreated bipolar disorder, overwhelmed by trauma and desperation. His lawyers argued that he had long faced extreme mood swings, impulsivity, and disorganized thinking, which are symptoms of a serious mental illness. They reminded the jury of the sudden death of his father from a heart attack when Leon was just 13 years old. Leon had been alone with him at that moment and carried the guilt ever since. Leon's mother, who is a lawyer, testified that he never fully processed that trauma and remained emotionally fragile as a result. The defense argued that he wasn't evil, but rather broken. The prosecution had a different perspective. They portrayed Leon as cold, calculating. He didn't just plan a crime, he also recruited accomplices, easily told lies, paid people he believed were hitmen, even proposed using chemicals to induce heart attacks. When shown images of Megan being tied up and gagged, he didn't react or object. In fact, he seemed to approve. Megan testified about the distressing experience of being stalked and harassed by Leon, which left her feeling terrified. She called the police numerous times for help. She also provided testimony, describing the threats and emotional abuse she endured during their marriage, including a chilling remark from Leon that she would not be found if she left him. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Leon maintained his innocence, claiming he never intended to harm anyone and that the police had coerced him into making him sound guilty. His defense team argued that he only aimed to intimidate Megan and protect his future. However, the jury was not convinced and took just 2 hours to reach their decision. Leon Jacob was found guilty on 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder for his attempts to have Megan and Mac killed. He received a life sentence in prison and was fined $10,000, with the possibility of parole in 2047. As the verdict was revealed, a disturbing detail surfaced. Leon once mentioned to someone that this whole situation would make for an excellent movie. However, this was not a film. The consequences were real and painful. A child lost her mother, a community lost its trust, and 2 lives were nearly destroyed, all to protect a man who believed he could act without consequences. Thankfully, this time the worst outcome was averted just in time. Valentine's Day is typically about celebrating love, but for Susan Hamilton, it took a dark turn. As she prepared to leave her house, her hair still wet and fully dressed, everything seemed normal. However, soon after, her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, frantically called 911. When the police arrived, they discovered a shocking scene. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in John's account began to surface. Was this attack random, or was it connected to their home life? In Oklahoma City, a love story unfolded that would eventually surprise the entire community. It all began in 1985 when Susan, a devoted single mother and Christian nurse, met Dr. John Hamilton, a well-respected obstetrician and gynecologist. John, a devoted father, instantly felt a strong connection to Susan's kindness. Susan, in turn, appreciated John's supportive nature. 2 years later, they married in 1987, creating what many viewed as an ideal life together. They settled into a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, a testament to the success of John's thriving medical practice. Susan chose to leave her nursing job to focus on their marriage and community involvement, quickly becoming a respected figure in both their church and local community. John and Susan Hamilton appeared to live a perfect life. Their relationship seemed filled with joy. They often enjoyed luxurious vacations and romantic outings together. John was particularly generous, showering Susan with expensive gifts like jewelry, luxury cars, including a Porsche, and designer items that highlighted both their wealth. He was attentive and caring, always striving to make Susan feel cherished. Susan, in turn, loved him just as much. Their marriage lasted over 15 years, during which they experienced both shared achievements and private struggles. Despite not having children together, John had a family from an earlier relationship. They remained committed to one another. However, beneath this seemingly perfect life, issues began to arise. What looked like a fairy tale was soon to take a dark and tragic turn. As time went on, John became a key figure in the termination of pregnancy. In addition to delivering babies and addressing women's health issues, he also performed termination of pregnancy at his clinic. This aspect of his work not only faced moral opposition but also posed personal risks. Activists often gathered outside his clinic, holding signs, handing out provocative flyers, spreading his name and photo in attempts to shame or intimidate him. The harassment extended beyond the clinic. It reached his home as well. His wife, Susan, started receiving threatening phone calls. Some of these messages were so alarming that she feared for her safety. Despite living under this shadow of fear, the Hamiltons focused on maintaining their public image. They hosted fancy gatherings, stayed involved in community activities, and appeared to live an enviable life. John consistently showed love and affection for Susan, making every Valentine's Day a special occasion. They followed their cherished tradition of exchanging heartfelt cards and small gifts, keeping the romance alive throughout the years. On the morning of February 14, 2001, John started his day by leaving for work around 7 a.m. to perform surgery at the hospital. He arrived in regular clothes and changed into scrubs. After completing the first procedure at 8:40 a.m., he returned home briefly. John stated that he left a bouquet of flowers and a Valentine's card for Susan before heading back for his second surgery. He mentioned that she was not home at that time. When he returned later that morning, everything had changed. John sensed that something was wrong. The door was slightly open, which was unusual. Inside, the house felt eerily quiet. As he moved through the rooms, he was unprepared for what he found next. In the bathroom, Susan lay on the floor, covered in blood. Her injuries were shocking. She had been strangled with 2 neckties, and her skull had been so severely crushed that brain matter was visible. The murder weapon was never found. In a state of desperation, John called 911, his voice shaking as he pleaded for assistance. He was explaining that he had attempted CPR but was unable to revive her. Emergency responders arrived within minutes to a horrifying scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, indicating a violent struggle. This wasn't just a murder, it seemed excessively brutal. The level of violence suggested that whoever did this must have had deep personal animosity towards Susan. But who could act like that about a woman so loved by everyone? Officers quickly noticed some troubling details at the scene. Both of Hamilton's cars were parked in the driveway. Inside the house, John's shirt and shoes were covered in blood. There were also blood traces in his car. Investigators found the inconsistencies and the signs of extreme violence hard to overlook. Initially, the situation didn't add up. John and Susan appeared to be the perfect couple, loving, successful. Their life resembled a picture from a magazine. However, the reality was much more sinister than anyone had anticipated. By that day, it would no longer represent love. Instead, it would mark the start of a startling investigation that shattered the community's perception of John and Susan Hamilton. Suspicion quickly turned to her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, as he was the last person known to have seen her alive and was the one who found her body. That evening, the police arrested him. From the start, John's behavior was questionable. During the interrogation, he seemed very upset, his hands trembled, he couldn't remain still, and at times he appeared inconsolable. Some believed he was simply overcome with grief, while others thought his reactions seemed staged. His inconsistent behavior made it hard to distinguish between true sorrow and possible guilt. Even though the front door was left open, unusual for their wealthy neighborhood, nothing valuable had been stolen. The house, filled with luxury items like expensive jewelry, electronics, and fine art, remained untouched. Investigators quickly dismissed the idea of robbery. There were no indications of forced entry. However, a small marble figurine was missing from the bathroom. Detectives believed it could have been used to harm Susan, but the figurine was never located. Investigators explored various options due to the lack of a clear motive or external suspects. One theory was that the murder might have been politically motivated. Due to his job, John faced threats and protests. The couple became openly targeted. However, there was no concrete evidence connecting the crime to any of the protesters. No eyewitnesses, no signs of forced entry, and no leads to follow. The key discovery was surprisingly personal, a Valentine's Day card. While searching the Hamilton home, police found a card that Susan had written for John. What seemed like a straightforward love note became significant for investigators. The message said, "I obviously bought this before last Monday, so I guess it doesn't seem appropriate now. I still love you, though. Have a good day, Susan." This raised concerns for detectives. What events occurred the previous Monday? Why did she feel the card was no longer suitable? Questions began to arise. The card's tone, which felt conflicted and detached, sharply contrasted with the loving image they showed to others. Soon, rumors of a hidden truth started to emerge. One of Susan's closest friends informed the police that she suspected John was having an affair. This revelation shattered the image of the devoted husband and revealed something much darker. Susan had confided to her daughter that she felt trapped in her marriage. She described her relationship as one-sided, where everything centered around John. He demanded her attention, ignored her feelings, and made her feel invisible. She even admitted to considering leaving him. The seemingly perfect marriage that the public admired was turning out to be a fragile facade. Detectives investigated further, revealing a more concerning situation. Susan found phone records indicating over 60 calls to the same woman, a stripper from a local club. She printed the records and confronted John, who denied any wrongdoing, claiming the woman was simply a hospital patient. However, Susan was skeptical. She confided in a friend about the confrontation and mentioned she was considering divorce, which may have been the breaking point. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that Susan was getting ready to leave a marriage that no longer fulfilled her. John faced the possibility of losing not only his wife but also his reputation, lifestyle, and perhaps his career. By February 14th, The Valentine's Day traditions that once represented lasting love now hid the painful reality of a crumbling relationship. What used to feel like genuine affection, flowers, a card, might have actually been a frantic attempt to salvage something that had already fallen apart behind their lavish facade. The extravagant gifts and polished public image masked a brewing storm. When it finally erupted, it resulted in a chaotic and deeply personal situation that could no longer be overlooked. As the investigation into Susan Hamilton's brutal murder progressed, a more troubling picture of John Hamilton emerged. Behind his polished image and respected career was a man who desperately wanted to protect his reputation. A pending divorce and a public affair threatened to ruin everything he had built. Initially, John denied any romantic relationship with the woman Susan suspected, insisting she was just a patient. However, the truth eventually surfaced. Investigators found that he had been frequently visiting her at the strip club where she worked, and she had given him private dances. Despite the growing evidence, John maintained that nothing physical had happened between them, but this defense seemed weak. One important detail emerged: John had written a letter to the woman, saying he could no longer be her doctor. While it might seem like he was ending their relationship, it raised questions. Was he trying to regain Susan's trust, or was he manipulating the situation to postpone a divorce? To the police, it appeared to be an attempt at damage control. The media found the story intriguing and became heavily involved, sensing there was more beneath the surface. One local news station even sent the 911 call John made to a voice stress analyst. The results were surprising. The analysis showed his voice had very little stress, uncharacteristic for someone who had just found his wife's mutilated body. This indicated that he wasn't panicked or heartbroken, but rather calm and in control, as if he had rehearsed what to say. The inconsistencies continued to unfold. John told emergency responders that he tried to perform CPR, but investigators were doubtful. They noticed there was no blood on his mouth or face. Given the severity of Susan's head injuries, if he had genuinely attempted to resuscitate her, he would likely have been covered in blood. Instead, evidence indicated otherwise. Forensic analysis showed that the blood found on John's shirt and shoes belonged to Susan. Even more incriminating was the discovery of her blood and tissue inside his car, which was much more than initially thought. John claimed he moved his car to give paramedics space, but this explanation fell apart when examined closely. The presence of tissue fragments suggested that Susan had been in the car after she was injured or that John had moved evidence after the murder. The blood pattern found on John's clothing did not support his account of the events. Instead of suggesting he was an innocent bystander trying to help, the evidence indicated he was directly involved in the violence. The investigators' theory was disturbing. In a fit of rage or desperation, John tried to strangle Susan with his ties. When she fought back, he became more violent. He hit her in the head with a blunt object, possibly the missing marble figurine. After she fell, he violently crushed her skull. This was not a random act or a robbery, it was a personal and brutal murder driven by overwhelming anger. Evidence against John was piling up: the affair, blood evidence, stress analysis, the missing figurine, and a motive rooted in ego, pride, and a fear of shame. Their marriage had been troubled long before that tragic day. On the morning of the murder, John returned home after his first surgery, not just to drop off flowers and a Valentine's card as he had claimed, but to confront Susan. The argument that ensued would end their marriage in a horrific way. The timeline shows that Susan was getting ready to leave for a 9:30 a.m. appointment with a friend. She was found not to be wearing clothes, with damp hair. Detectives found an important detail in John's hospital schedule. His second surgery was supposed to start at 9 a.m., but he didn't arrive until 9:38. The staff had even sent someone to search for him because of his delay. During those 30 unexplained minutes, John had the opportunity to commit the murder. He thought he would have more time to clean up, but a sudden call back to the hospital interrupted him. In a panic, he changed out of his blood-stained clothes and returned to work just in time for surgery, appearing calm, focused, and professional as if nothing had happened. Hours later, when he called 911, he acted devastated. However, for investigators, the truth was already starting to come out. The close distance of their home to the hospital was crucial to the case, showing that John could have committed the crime and still returned in time for surgery. More importantly, it ruled out the possibility that someone else had entered the house in the brief window between John's departure and Susan's planned outing. There simply wasn't enough time for another person to commit the crime without being noticed. During the trial preparations, John's defense team decided to hire a blood spatter expert to evaluate the evidence. However, this decision proved to be detrimental for John's case. While testifying, the expert was asked if the prosecution had missed anything important, and he revealed a shocking finding. He had identified blood stains on the inside sleeve of John's shirt that matched patterns consistent with blunt force trauma. Although he was brought in to support the defense, the expert could not ignore the facts. His analysis confirmed the prosecution's suspicions. The blood must have been there at the exact moment Susan was attacked. This revelation dealt a devastating blow to John Hamilton's defense. In the courtroom, the evidence revealed a disturbing story of deliberate anger. The reasons behind John's actions were evident. The jury acted quickly. John Hamilton was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. He was also required to pay over $11,000 for his incarceration expenses. John is currently incarcerated at the Dick Connor Correctional Center in Hominy, Oklahoma. This case was unprecedented in the county and had a significant impact. John has submitted several appeals, all of which have been rejected. He has consistently claimed that he did not commit the murder. Even now, he insists on his innocence, and a dedicated group of supporters believes he was wrongly convicted. However, the question persists: was justice achieved, or is there more to this story than people understand? Did John Hamilton deserve a life sentence, or was this situation based on circumstantial evidence that was misinterpreted? Ashley Bocanegra was born in the Bronx, one of New York City's 5 boroughs. She was raised by her mother along with her older sister. There is no public information about her father, and it remains unclear whether he was involved in Ashley's life. The family lived modestly but maintained a stable lifestyle. Ashley was outgoing and energetic. She took pride in her appearance and had a strong interest in makeup. From a young age, she enjoyed experimenting with different styles, which made her stand out among her peers. After high school, she did not pursue a specific career path right away. Instead, she worked in retail while trying to figure out her future, but she did not have any firm plans. Around this time, she met a young man with whom she soon developed a serious relationship. They spent a lot of time together, and eventually, Ashley found out she was expecting. The pregnancy was unplanned, but they both decided to embrace this new chapter in their lives and moved in together. In 2014, Ashley gave birth to a son whose name has not been publicly disclosed out of respect for his privacy. The arrival of their son marked a significant shift. Ashley became fully focused on being a mother. Despite being young, her partner stepped up and participated in raising their child. Life in New York City was becoming increasingly challenging, with rising rent and piling daily expenses. By early 2015, they decided to move to Atlanta, Georgia, a city with more affordable housing and a slower pace of life that was not too far from extended family. This move represented a fresh start for them. They secured an apartment in a residential complex that had security cameras and on-site staff. Visually, the neighborhood appeared safe, and they hoped it would be a place to rebuild their daily lives. Although their romantic relationship eventually came to an end, they continued to live under the same roof for the sake of their son. They agreed to keep their personal lives separate until their son was older. Ashley took on most of the household responsibilities and began looking for a stable job. Eventually, she landed a position at a home improvement store, working the night shift. This arrangement allowed her to be at home during the day. It was a tough schedule, but it helped her improve her financial situation. Ashley was working toward creating stability and gradually gaining independence from her former partner, all while maintaining peaceful family dynamics. As Ashley adjusted to the demanding rhythm of overnight work, she became familiar with the store's routine. Most of her shifts took place on weeknights, and she was consistently scheduled with the same group of co-workers. This consistency helped form close-knit working relationships. It was in this environment that she first took notice of Daniel Gonzalez. He also worked at the same home improvement store and was usually scheduled on the same nights. Their conversations began with routine work-related questions. Daniel was proactive. He did not shy away from hard tasks and often volunteered for demanding assignments. He came across as calm, polite, and friendly. Although he wasn't pushy, he was often nearby when Ashley needed an extra hand. Over time, they developed a steady rapport. What started as brief exchanges during breaks slowly evolved into real conversations, and Ashley felt at ease around him. There was no pressure or signs of him pushing boundaries. Daniel earned her trust. He avoided discussing personal matters and never made suggestive remarks, but it was clear he was interested. He asked about her day, showed concern for her well-being, and offered to help even when she had not asked for it. This set him apart from the rest of the crew. With each shift, their connection grew. Eventually, they exchanged numbers and began texting outside of work. Their messages quickly turned into a regular flow of jokes, short chats about everyday life, and occasionally planning to meet before work. Their bond transcended that of mere co-workers, yet there was nothing overtly romantic about it. Everything felt natural. No one was rushing into anything, and neither made any direct moves. At that time, Ashley was unaware of Daniel's personal life. Neither he nor their co-workers mentioned that he was living with a woman and their children. Daniel never discussed who shared his home. There were no indications that he was in a relationship. In normal conversations, he seemed calm and composed, displaying no signs of stress or complicated domestic issues. They eventually realized they were neighbors living in the same apartment complex. They discovered this by chance during a conversation about their neighborhood. This made it easy for them to see each other not only at work but also during the day. Sometimes, Daniel would help Ashley carry her groceries, or they would bump into each other in the parking lot, where he would walk her to her building. To Ashley, this felt like a comfortable friendship with a reliable coworker. His proximity and willingness to help were nice perks, making him seem thoughtful. She was unaware of his actual circumstances. At the time of these events, Daniel Gonzalez was a 27-year-old living in Atlanta, Georgia. He was in a long-term relationship with Antonetta Stevens, a woman of the same age, although they were not legally married. They had been together for over a decade, having known each other since childhood, as their families were longtime friends. Throughout their relationship, they became parents to 2 sons, aged 9 and 6. However, their home life was more complicated than it appeared. Daniel and Antonetta's relationship had become increasingly strained over the years, with arguments happening more often. While most disagreements arose from everyday issues, they frequently escalated into larger conflicts. People close to them described Antonetta as having a quick temper. She could quickly shift from calm to confrontational over minor annoyances. This tendency was noticeable not only to Daniel but also to others in their circle. Daniel seldom discussed his home life with his colleagues. Only a few close friends were aware of his personal struggles, which he kept private. However, the ongoing stress at home began to take a toll on him. His relationship with Antonetta shifted from one of love to a focus on logistics, with conversations revolving around parenting, bills, and household chores. Although they still appeared as a couple to outsiders, their emotional connection was diminishing. During this time, Daniel's younger sister, Janine Gonzalez, who was 17 and had recently dropped out of school, moved in with them. She lacked a clear direction, needed a new environment to get back on track. Janine quickly bonded with Antonetta due to their shared history, having known each other since childhood and considering each other more like sisters than in-laws. In contrast, Daniel did not have a strong relationship with Janine. The presence of a third adult in the household did not reduce the tension. In fact, it increased it. Janine frequently witnessed the arguments between Daniel and Antonetta. Eventually, she began to take sides, clearly supporting Antonetta. Those familiar with the family noted that Janine openly expressed her belief that Daniel was responsible for the ongoing conflicts. This alliance between Janine and Antonetta only widened the emotional gap in the household, leaving Daniel feeling isolated. By the time Daniel started spending more time with Ashley, he was already feeling disconnected. His partner was irritable, their sons required constant attention, and his sister emotionally sided with Antonetta. The home atmosphere felt strained and unwelcoming. Daniel began spending more time outside of his home, taking extra shifts at work and staying later as a way to avoid conflicts in his life. Although these choices would later impact his decisions, he didn't express any strong desire to change his situation at that time. After a few weeks of talking at work and texting outside of their shifts, Ashley and Daniel started to meet up more often outside of work. Their conversations shifted from casual workplace topics to more personal subjects. They discussed feelings of tiredness, daily routines, and the challenges of parenting. Ashley shared her experiences raising her son, her complicated relationship with her partner, and her hopes of moving out to live independently. Daniel listened closely. He didn't interrupt her, kept the conversation flowing, and engaged with their shared difficulties. He never mentioned that he lived with a partner and 2 sons, nor did he talk about his sister. As Ashley and Daniel's relationship grew stronger, they began spending more time together. Sometimes, they would meet briefly before her shifts, while other times, they would talk outside her building. Over time, Daniel started to stay a bit longer. He would visit in the evenings, help her prepare dinner, and hang out while her son watched TV. This development felt gradual and natural, not sudden. Ashley didn't ask many questions, and Daniel didn't give her any reasons to doubt him. At that point, neither her son nor their coworkers intervened. Ashley enjoyed her independence. Everything appeared harmless from an outside perspective. Back at Daniel's apartment, things were starting to change. Antonetta and Janine began to pay closer attention to his schedule. Daniel was spending more time away from home, which did not escape their notice. Janine, who was usually at home, started to see a pattern. Daniel would leave without telling anyone where he was going and would often return later than expected. Though she didn't know his exact whereabouts, she began to keep track of his comings and goings. Eventually, she shared her concerns with Antonetta, and their suspicions grew. While Antonetta didn't confront Daniel immediately, his behavior made her feel uncomfortable. One day, Janine noticed something that confirmed her suspicions. Daniel was often seen with the same woman in the apartment complex parking lot. Although she didn't know Ashley's name yet, her appearance stuck in Janine's mind. Janine observed their conversations and noticed there were no inappropriate gestures, touching, or flirting, nothing that clearly crossed any boundaries. However, this situation raised her concerns. She didn't jump to conclusions, but from that moment, she started paying more attention. While Ashley viewed these meetings as casual and innocent, the atmosphere in Daniel's apartment became increasingly tense. Antonetta moved beyond just asking questions. She began checking his phone and closely monitoring his behavior. Although she had no solid evidence, the signs were accumulating. As a result, the trust between them began to erode. Ashley remained oblivious to any underlying issues. Daniel frequently visited, offering assistance and chatting about everyday matters, which seemed to strengthen their relationship. However, underneath these casual conversations, subtle changes were occurring. In the summer of 2022, Daniel, Antonetta, their sons, and Janine traveled to Florida for Antonetta's mother's wedding. They planned to spend a week with extended family, blending celebrations with a short vacation. The road trip was long, and they stayed at a relative's house. Despite the happy occasion, tension between Daniel and Antonetta was evident from the start. They argued during the drive over minor issues related to planning, coordination, and exhaustion. Upon arrival, the situation did not improve. Conflicts arose almost every day, and Antonetta's relatives noticed the strain in their relationship. By midweek, disagreements escalated over trivial matters. The tone of their exchanges turned increasingly sharp and irritable. Daniel often ended conversations abruptly, emotionally withdrew, and spent more time absorbed in his phone or stepping outside for solitude. Antonetta observed these changes and tried to remain calm, but her patience was wearing thin. After the wedding ceremony, while most guests were relaxing, a pivotal moment took place. Daniel, feeling tired and having had a few drinks, was outside in the yard talking to Janine. During their conversation, he expressed that he was exhausted from his relationship with Antonetta and didn't see a future with her. He also revealed that there was someone else in his life, without disclosing the name, but indicated it was a co-worker. Janine listened attentively, keeping her response neutral, though she was clearly processing the information. This conversation became a turning point. Feeling more loyal to Antonetta than to her own brother, Janine decided to share what she had learned. She informed Antonetta that Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else. To her surprise, Antonetta remained calm. Rather than confronting him right away, she chose to be strategic. Her priority was to identify the other woman. They agreed to keep their suspicions quiet and to closely monitor Daniel's behavior. Janine fully supported this plan, and they made a pact: no actions would be taken until they returned to Atlanta. Antonetta kept a calm, cheerful demeanor around her family for the rest of the trip. Though everything appeared peaceful on the surface, she was quietly strategizing to find out who the woman was. After returning from Florida, the mood in Daniel's apartment shifted. Antonetta and Janine didn't mention the wedding conversation, but they began to execute a plan they had developed in secrecy. Their goal was to find out if Daniel was really involved with a coworker. Instead of asking him directly, they decided to observe his habits and behavior. Since neither Antonetta nor Janine had full-time jobs at that moment, they spent most of their days at home, which allowed them to watch Daniel closely. Janine took note of when he left the apartment, who he interacted with, and how he acted when he returned. They also started checking Daniel's phone whenever it was left unattended or unlocked to look for notifications or messages. A few days after returning, Janine reported seeing Daniel leaving work with a young woman. They were outside, smoking and chatting. Janine noted that while their interaction didn't seem overtly romantic, there was a comfortable rapport between them. She remembered the woman's appearance, and when she described her, Antonetta suspected it might be their neighbor, Ashley. Antonetta recalled seeing Ashley in the complex courtyard occasionally, usually with her son. That evening, they decided to watch for Ashley to see if she would appear again. Over the next few days, Antonetta and Janine took turns watching the apartment entrance and the area surrounding the store to confirm whether it was indeed Ashley with Daniel. Their surveillance eventually paid off. They saw Daniel and Ashley talking and then going their separate ways. With this confirmation, they moved forward and took action. Antonetta proposed using Daniel's phone while he slept to message Ashley and lure her into a meeting, setting up a direct confrontation. Janine agreed with the plan. They now had a clear objective. It was no longer just about revealing the truth, it had turned personal. They wanted revenge. The next morning, after finishing a night shift, Daniel came home and went to sleep as usual, briefly chatting with Antonetta before heading to the bedroom. Once he was asleep, she quietly entered the room, took his phone, and brought it to Janine. Together, they started scrolling through his messages. It didn't take long to find what they were looking for. In his chat with Ashley, they found personal messages filled with emotional significance, mentions of past meetings, and small details that confirmed the two were in constant contact. That was all the confirmation they needed to move on to the next step. Antonetta used Daniel's phone to send a text to Ashley. She explained that Daniel had an argument at home, was kicked out, and wanted to meet. Ashley responded quickly, asking for his location and how to find him. Their conversation seemed typical for two people who know each other well, so Ashley was unaware that she was not actually communicating with Daniel. Antonetta kept the tone light and casual to prevent any suspicion. After exchanging a few more messages, Antonetta proposed they meet in the courtyard of their apartment complex, a small grassy area between the buildings, and Ashley agreed. After arranging the meetup, Antonetta and Janine started getting ready. They brought Janine's phone to record what would happen. They were unarmed and planned to lure Ashley outside to confront her unexpectedly and escalate things physically. Their intention was not just to have a conversation but to make a statement. They carefully chose the location. It was close enough to nearby buildings for visibility but out of sight from the main entrances. While there were surveillance cameras in common areas, they didn't cover this specific spot, offering a sense of privacy within the complex. At that time, Daniel was asleep, completely unaware that his phone was being used. Early in the morning, Antonetta and Janine left the apartment, leaving Daniel and the boys behind. They positioned themselves behind some bushes near a pedestrian path. The area was shaded and slightly away from the building entrances, but still on public property. Visibility was limited, although someone walking by might notice them. They waited. When Ashley texted to say she was on her way, Antonetta made sure the phone was recording and instructed Janine to continue filming no matter what. Minutes later, Ashley walked down the path, completely unaware of the danger that awaited her. As she neared her destination, she scanned the area, hoping to see Daniel. Suddenly, Antonetta and Janine emerged from their hiding place. Antonetta approached Ashley and loudly claimed that Ashley stopped texting Daniel. Before Ashley could reply, Antonetta attacked her. Ashley did not fight back. Instead, she tried to defend herself by covering her face with her hands and begging Antonetta to stop. Despite her pleas, Antonetta continued to hit her. Eventually, Antonetta knocked Ashley to the ground and continued to assault her with her fists and feet. At one point, she grabbed Ashley's hair and slammed her head against the pavement. Janine chose not to intervene and instead stayed on the sidelines, recording the events. Occasionally, she provided commentary, encouraging Antonetta to be more aggressive. At one point, she moved closer to capture a shot of Ashley's face, who was crying and pleading for them to stop. Despite Ashley's distress, the aggression continued. Antonetta yelled accusations, made threats, and claimed she was acting for Daniel. At one moment, she looked directly into the camera and told Janine to keep filming. Some cars drove by, but no one intervened. One vehicle stopped for a moment but then quickly left the scene. The conflict escalated when Antonetta invited Janine to participate. Janine accepted, approached, and delivered a few kicks. Afterward, both of them took Ashley's phone and walked away, with the recording still running until they left the area. Following the attack, Ashley lay on the pavement. Although she was seriously injured, she was conscious. After some time on the ground, she gradually stood up. She was unsteady. Despite the pain, she started walking toward her building. Later, surveillance footage from the apartment complex showed Ashley entering. Her steps were shaky, and her movements were slow. She was holding her side and chest, and her face had visible scrapes. Her breathing seemed labored. As soon as she reached her floor, Ashley stepped out onto the balcony and leaned against the railing to catch her breath. At that moment, her partner was coming home from his morning run. Upon entering the apartment, he quickly noticed that Ashley looked unwell. She was pale, had swollen lips, and visible cuts on her face. Her breathing was heavy, and she moved slowly. Her clothes were dirty, had some blood on them. Concerned, he asked her what had happened. Ashley responded vaguely, saying she had been attacked by two unfamiliar women but did not provide any names or reasons for the attack. She might have been too frightened or still in shock to explain further. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, her partner helped her sit down and got her some water, but her condition worsened. She struggled to breathe, experienced sharp pain in her side and head. Any movement caused her intense discomfort. A few minutes later, he took her to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, doctors assessed Ashley's condition and quickly decided to transfer her to intensive care due to its critical nature. Medical staff observed multiple bruises, broken ribs, and potential internal injuries. Additionally, she suffered a head injury. Meanwhile, her partner stayed at the hospital, anxiously awaiting news. Ashley was put on life support and sedated, but her condition worsened. Several hours after the assault, local law enforcement arrived at the apartment complex in response to reports of a possible fight from witnesses. When the officers reached the apartment shared by Antonetta, Daniel, their sons, and Janine, Daniel was not at home. Antonetta answered the door and spoke to the officers in a calm and composed manner. She explained that an uninvited woman had arrived at their door, started an argument, and became physically aggressive. Antonetta stated that she did not know the woman and that it was the woman who initiated the confrontation. She characterized the incident as a mutual fight, mentioning that both had exchanged blows. Antonetta also noted that the woman had been previously harassing her partner at work and had come to their home to continue the harassment. She made it clear that she had not left the apartment before the incident to support her version of events. At this point, the officers had not received a formal complaint from the injured party, did not know the identity of the other person involved, and had no direct evidence of the assault. While Antonetta's account was consistent, it did not match the known facts. Doctors at the first hospital where Ashley was treated had alerted local authorities because of the seriousness of her condition. However, when police arrived at the apartment complex, the medical report was not connected to the attack. Information about Ashley's injuries and her identity came to light later. The police left the apartment without filing an official report, they only documented a verbal statement. They did not conduct a search or collect phones as evidence, which resulted in the loss of important materials. At this point, Antonetta and Janine were unaware that they would soon be named as official suspects. After the initial examination in the emergency room, doctors suspected Ashley had suffered serious internal injuries. Although she was conscious, she was having difficulty breathing and could barely respond to questions. A CT scan showed multiple severe injuries, broken ribs punctured her lungs, there was internal bleeding around her liver and abdomen, and she had a significant brain injury with swelling. Since the hospital lacked the necessary resources for urgent neurosurgery and abdominal procedures, doctors decided to transfer her immediately to a specialized trauma center. Ashley was put on a ventilator and sedated into a medically induced coma. She was airlifted to a hospital in another part of the state, where a team of trauma surgeons and critical care doctors was ready to assist. Upon her arrival, Ashley was taken straight to the operating room. The surgeons worked to stop the internal bleeding and stabilize her vital signs, but the injuries were too severe. Her liver was partially torn, and there was significant bleeding in her abdominal cavity. During the surgery, it became evident that her injuries were not survivable. About an hour after her transfer, Ashley suffered cardiac arrest. Medical teams performed CPR for 30 minutes but could not revive her. She was pronounced dead early that morning, just a few hours after the incident. While this was happening, hospital staff submitted a report to the local police department stating that a patient showed signs of having been attacked. As Ashley was being moved, this information was relayed to the on-call officer. However, it had not yet been linked to an earlier visit by officers to the complex. Ashley's death changed the legal context of the case. The police department received the hospital's report, which indicated that the situation had turned fatal. Officers quickly connected this update to the previous complaint about a physical altercation and realized that both incidents occurred at the same address. The deceased's last name was verified through medical records and matched with entries associated with the apartment complex. The police leadership decided to send officers back to Antonetta's apartment. By this time, they no longer considered it a simple domestic dispute. The situation was being seen as a potential felony that could result in death. This initiated a formal criminal investigation. Authorities also requested Ashley's complete medical records to assess the severity and nature of her injuries. The initial medical report revealed that her injuries could not have occurred from a minor fight or mutual confrontation. The trauma to her head, chest, and internal organs indicated she had suffered a severe beating. There were multiple blows aimed at vital areas. Additionally, there were no signs of defensive wounds or any indication that she fought back, suggesting that the victim likely did not defend herself during the attack. Following the medical findings, the forensic report, and surveillance footage from the apartment complex, a criminal case was officially opened. After confirming Ashley's death, investigators returned to the complex, arrested Antonetta and Janine. They were taken to the precinct and interviewed separately starting immediately. Antonetta seemed calm but distant during her questioning. She avoided making eye contact, spoke in a low voice, and gave unclear answers. She provided short responses and repeated the same story she had told earlier, that Ashley had come to their home uninvited, started an argument, and threw the first punch. She did not mention any text messages, a pre-arranged meeting, or the use of Daniel's phone. Antonetta maintained that the incident was unplanned and that she acted solely in self-defense. When detectives highlighted discrepancies between her account and the medical evidence, she did not respond. After answering a few more questions, she requested a lawyer and ended the interview. Janine's interrogation took an unexpectedly relaxed turn. She entered the room confidently and spoke freely, showing no signs of nervousness. At times, she even laughed and made sarcastic remarks, behaving more like she was chatting with friends than talking to law enforcement. The detectives mirrored her casual tone and avoided any confrontational approach, which proved effective. Janine began to share details openly about the events, including some information that hadn't been revealed before. She openly explained how Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else, how she had passed that information to Antonetta, and how they devised a plan to message Ashley using Daniel's phone. She also detailed who initially suggested recording the encounter and how they concealed themselves until Ashley arrived. Janine's account of the confrontation was particularly striking. She openly admitted to being physically aggressive, stating that she joined in because she was invited to participate. She even described the incident as amusing. The detectives documented her statements but did not interrupt her. They maintained neutral expressions, allowing her to express herself freely. During the questioning, Janine confirmed that she had recorded the incident on her phone and still had the footage saved. She revealed almost everything Antonetta had tried to hide. Her statements were officially noted. Janine's emotional distance and complete lack of remorse strengthened the evidence that the attack was not only intentional but also planned in advance. After the interviews, investigators obtained search warrants and seized phones from everyone involved, including Janine's. Her phone contained a full video recording of the assault. The footage showed that Ashley did not fight back, and the attacks were carried out methodically with clear intent. The audio also captured mocking remarks, threats, and statements indicating that the attack was premeditated. Daniel's phone showed a message thread where Antonetta pretended to be him to set up the meeting. This was clear proof of the trick used to put Ashley in danger. As a result, Antonetta and Janine were charged with serious crimes, including felony assault and robbery. Their arrests were part of a larger criminal investigation. The charges were explained to them, highlighting the serious legal consequences they faced. Both were arrested without any resistance, but officers closely monitored the situation. Daniel later learned about the events that unfolded. When the arrests took place, he was at work. Officers came to his workplace to inform him of Ashley's death and the charges against Antonetta and Janine. He was heartbroken, having no knowledge of the revenge plan, the impersonation using his phone, or the attack itself. He stated that he could never have predicted that things would turn into such a tragedy. Daniel was asked to provide a formal statement. He confirmed that Ashley had never been a threat to anyone and that their relationship was not a secret. He also mentioned that he had never given his phone to anyone and was unaware of any messages sent from it. His account aligned with the evidence gathered, leading investigators to conclude that he was not involved in the crime. He expressed his willingness to cooperate fully and may be called to testify in court, as the fatal setup was carried out using his digital identity without his knowledge. Both suspects were found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison at Arundel State Prison in Georgia. Janine, who was only 17 at the time, was tried as an adult because of the seriousness of the crime. If she doesn't face any disciplinary issues while in prison, she will be released when she is about 37 years old. The impact of the crime was severe. Ashley's son lost his mother. Custody of the child was awarded to his father, who had been involved in his son's life even after he and Ashley ended their relationship. Now, he has taken on full responsibility, working to create a stable and safe environment for his son amidst the profound loss. Daniel and Antonetta's two sons also experienced the loss of their mother. Since Daniel was not implicated in the crime, he retained custody of the children and continued to raise them on his own. Despite the trauma of losing Ashley and the emotional burden of knowing their mother would be in prison for decades, Daniel remained dedicated to his role as a father. Both families were deeply affected. One child lost his mother, while Daniel's two sons were also left without their mother. What began as a situation fueled by jealousy and betrayal ended in tragedy, incarceration, and lasting pain for those who were innocent in this situation. The young lives impacted will always feel the effects of a crime they did not commit and will never fully escape from it. In October 1975, the murder of 15-year-old Martha Elizabeth Moxley shocked the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Her body was found brutally beaten with a golf club, which was traced back to the home of a well-known family with political ties. This tragic event caused years of anguish for the Moxley family as they sought justice for their daughter's death. Let's go back in time. The Moxley family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, hoping to find a safe environment for their children, John and Martha. Their parents allowed them to explore the town freely, trusting in their safety. Martha was a remarkable teenager known for her beauty and intelligence. She had a vibrant personality and a close bond with her brother. Throughout her childhood, Martha showed impressive intellect. Her love for reading and writing reflected her passion for knowledge. Martha was well liked by her peers because of her outstanding qualities. Her lively and friendly nature helped her make many friends. She often found herself at the center of social gatherings. After the Moxley family moved to their new home in Greenwich, Martha continued to excel in school. Her commitment to her studies showed through her excellent grades and achievements. She had a natural gift for critical thinking and problem solving, distinguishing her from her classmates. Martha's aspirations went beyond academics. She wanted to impact the world through her writing. Her love for storytelling and her talent for expressing ideas clearly made her a strong candidate for a journalism career. October 30th was recognized as Mischief Night in Greenwich. During this tradition, children and teens engaged in playful mischief, often causing minor disturbances in their neighborhoods. The night typically involved activities like vandalism, property damage, and pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Martha Moxley spent the evening playing toilet papering over houses with her friends. It was a joyful night filled with laughter and innocent entertainment among the teenagers. Among the partygoers was 17-year-old Thomas Skakel, the nephew of Ethel Kennedy, who is the widow of former U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was one of the most powerful and well-known political families in the United States from the 1960s to the early 1990s. Their name became closely associated with American politics, impacting all areas of society. President John F. Kennedy was viewed as a symbol of youthful energy and change, captivating the nation with his charisma. His administration made important advances in space exploration, civil rights, and foreign policy. After John's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy took on the role of leader for the family's political ambitions, known for his commitment to social justice and strong support for the civil rights movement. Robert's assassination added to the sorrow of the already mourning Kennedy family. However, their involvement in various scandals and controversies has damaged their reputation and overshadowed their political legacy. Sources indicate that Martha Moxley and Thomas Skakel were flirting and even kissing on the night she disappeared. The last sighting of Martha was around 9:30 p.m. when she was with Thomas near the pool in his backyard. After that, no one knew where she was until a shocking discovery was made the next morning, which stunned the entire community. On October 31st, the day after Mischief Night, Martha Moxley's body was discovered under a tree in her yard. Her clothing and underwear were pulled down to her ankles, but the medical examiner found no signs of abuse assault. Nearby, pieces of a 6-iron golf club were located, which became a key piece of evidence in understanding the circumstances surrounding Martha's death. The chief medical examiner of Connecticut performed an autopsy on Martha. His findings revealed disturbing details. Martha had multiple scalp lacerations, skull fractures, and injuries to her brain. The absence of signs of a struggle led the medical examiner to determine that Martha had been violently assaulted. The medical examiner determined that the weapon that caused her injuries and death was a 6-iron golf club, which matched evidence collected at the scene. The severity of her injuries and the strong evidence linking the golf club to the murder confirmed that her death was neither an accident nor an end to her own life. They classified Martha's death as a homicide. Witnesses reported seeing Martha with Thomas Skakel on the night she died, raising suspicions and directing detectives' focus towards the Skakel family. An investigation later found that the golf club used to kill Martha originated from the Skakel home, which further increased doubts about the involvement of the two Skakel brothers. Although the investigation made initial progress, it soon stalled due to interference from the Skakel family. They interfered with the investigation right from the beginning. One significant way they obstructed progress was by blocking the police from accessing their son's school medical records. These records could have shed light on Thomas Skakel's behavior and any health issues he might have had at the time of the crime. By denying investigators this information, the Skakel family hindered the exploration of potential motives. Thomas's father took further actions to impede the investigation. He discouraged witnesses from stepping forward or sharing what they knew about the crime, making it challenging for investigators to gather first-hand testimonies. This interference also significantly hampered the progress of the investigation. When news of Martha's murder emerged, Thomas and Michael Skakel, grandsons of Robert F. Kennedy, became targets of intense media scrutiny. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connections to Martha's death. As members of the Kennedy family, the brothers faced overwhelming speculation. Throughout the investigation, Thomas and Michael maintained their innocence, asserting that they had no involvement in Martha's murder. They consistently denied being at the party where she was killed and claimed ignorance about the circumstances of her death. Their repeated denials attracted even more media attention and public interest in the case. However, despite the extensive coverage, there was no solid evidence linking the brothers to Martha's murder. The murder of Martha Moxley attracted worldwide attention because of the involvement of the Kennedy family. Initially, attention turned to Kenneth Littleton, who was hired as a tutor by the Skakel family just hours before Martha's murder. Littleton was a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers, and since he was present near the crime scene, he was suspected of being an accomplice. His interactions with the brothers were examined, and some believed he might have influenced them to commit the crime. As time passed, the testimonies from Thomas and Michael Skakel about that night began to change. Witnesses reported that Michael had confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate of Michael claimed he received preferential treatment and boasted about escaping punishment for the murder because of his ties to the Kennedy family. Many books have been written about the Moxley murder in an effort to uncover the truth about her death. One notable book is A Season in Purgatory by acclaimed author Dominic Dunn, which focuses on the Moxley murder case. Dunn conducted thorough research to provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Martha's death. Another significant book, Murder in Greenwich by Mark Furman, a former police detective known, presents his perspective on the investigation and various theories surrounding the case. These books examine different theories proposed by investigators and advocates for justice for Martha. Despite significant media and public interest, the case remained unsolved, which caused frustration for both investigators and the public. The tragic death of Martha Moxley shocked the community and led to a lengthy investigation that lasted nearly 2 decades. In 1998, a jury was assembled to examine the circumstances of her murder. After a thorough inquiry lasting almost 2 years, there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with the crime. In January 2000, police issued an arrest warrant for Michael, who then turned himself in. He was soon released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond. On March 14, 2000, Michael was arraigned in juvenile court. Although he was 15 years old when Martha was murdered, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial began on May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Prosecutors built a strong case by presenting evidence linking him to the crime and highlighting inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense maintained that Michael was innocent, arguing he was at a cousin's house when the murder occurred. The murder trial of Martha Moxley received extensive media coverage, drawing attention from both national outlets and the local community. Many people were invested in the case, hoping for justice for the victim. During the trial, the prosecution introduced a book proposal that suggested his involvement in the crime. In this proposal, Michael admitted to engaging in inappropriate behavior while in a tree on the night of the murder. Although he acknowledged being at the crime scene, he did not confess to directly harming Martha. Ultimately, on June 7, 2002, Michael Skakel was convicted of Moxley's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut. Reactions to the verdict were mixed, with some individuals feeling satisfied and others raising concerns. Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, presenting several arguments. One of his main points was that the trial should have occurred in juvenile court instead of superior court, as he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He contended that his age should have prevented him from being charged as an adult. Furthermore, Skakel claimed that the prosecution committed misconduct by not disclosing crucial evidence that could have exonerated him, which he argued violated his due process rights and compromised the fairness of his trial. Nevertheless, in January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed his claims and upheld his conviction. In 2007, Michael Skakel hired a new attorney and requested a retrial in Connecticut court, proposing a new theory regarding Martha Moxley's murder. His defense team presented evidence implying that Gitano Tony Bryant, cousin of Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant and former classmate of Michael at Brunswick Private School in Greenwich. In an August 2003 videotaped interview with Vito Colucci, a private investigator hired by Michael, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had tried to molest her. Bryant said he had not come forward because his mother had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. A 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed this oral evidence to be presented, along with other matters. In September 2007, Michael's attorneys filed a motion, based in part on Bryant's complaints, for a new trial. Official prosecutors responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a drama about the case. During this period, Michael's defense team appointed several full-time investigators to examine case details, hoping to uncover new evidence that would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered when a Supreme Court judge rejected Michael's request for a new trial, stating that Bryant's testimony lacked credibility and that there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecutors during Michael's initial trial. Michael's attorneys once again appealed this ruling to the Connecticut Supreme Court. In 2009, a panel of 5 judges listened to the appeal, but a year later, on April 12, 2010, they ruled 4-1 against Michael. Despite these challenges, Michael and his legal team remained determined to secure his freedom. In January 2012, they requested a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been an exemplary prisoner and warranted leniency. However, this request was denied, and Michael's sentence continued to stand. In 2013, Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, claiming that his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, had not provided effective representation. During the hearing, Michael Skakel accused Sherman of lacking interest in his defense and being more focused on collecting fees to resolve his financial issues. This raised serious doubts about the fairness of his trial and the potential for a wrongful conviction. As a result, Michael was granted a new trial after it was determined that Sherman had not adequately defended him during his 2002 trial. On November 21, 2013, Michael Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail with other conditions. He must be monitored with a GPS device, have no contact with the Moxley family, must be checked in periodically by phone, and will not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless permission is granted, although he later moved to Westchester County, New York. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's murder conviction in a 4-3 majority decision, writing that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation was adequate. In January 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke Michael's bail and return him to prison to continue serving his sentence. However, on May 4, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated Skakel's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court ruled that Sherman had provided ineffective assistance when he failed to contact an alibi witness named by Michael and that Michael had therefore been deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stamford have the right to seek a new trial for Michael. This ruling surprised many in the legal community and rekindled questions about the true circumstances of the crime. Despite the possibility of a new trial, in October 2020, the chief state attorney informed the Supreme Court that they would not retry Michael Skakel for Martha's murder. This decision came after a thorough review of the evidence. This decision marked the end of a lengthy legal battle that spanned decades and left many unanswered questions about the murder of Martha Moxley. In 2023, Michael Skakel filed lawsuits against the police investigator in Greenwich. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of constitutional rights. According to Michael's attorney, The fact that Michael spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit meant he could never be compensated for that lost time. Michael's lawsuits claimed that the lead investigator did not perform their duties properly, acted unethically, and intimidated witnesses during interviews, alleged that the investigator threatened witnesses to make them give false statements. These accusations raised significant concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the validity of Michael Skakel's conviction. Furthermore, the lawsuits argued that the investigator sought to profit from Michael's case, indicating that they were working on a book and film about Michael's supposed involvement in Martha's murder while continuing the investigation. Martha's brother, John, was shocked by the news of Michael's freedom and struggles to grasp the reasoning behind the court's decision. He is convinced that Michael Skakel is guilty and insists that just because Michael is free, it doesn't mean he is innocent. Instead, it reflects the judge's decisions and legal technicalities. In John's view, Michael Skakel killed his sister, a belief he holds firmly. Even though Michael is no longer in prison, John believes he will always be mentally imprisoned, tormented by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen created a powerful documentary exploring the details of Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family chose to be part of the documentary to honor Martha and promote the truth about her case. Over the years, many theories have emerged regarding Martha Moxley's death. One of the key suspects is Michael Skakel. Several motives have been suggested for his alleged involvement, including jealousy and anger. Martha had a close friendship with Michael's brother, Thomas Skakel, which might have fueled Michael's resentment towards her. It has also been speculated that Michael may have seen a meeting between Martha and Thomas that triggered feelings of insecurity. Another suspect is Thomas Skakel himself. One theory proposes that he may have killed Martha out of jealousy or rage, especially since she reportedly rejected his advances. Additionally, their family tutor, Kenneth Littleton, has been considered a possible suspect. Others believe that her murderer was simply someone who happened to be passing by. Proponents of these theories argue that Michael Skakel was an easy target and that the true murderer has not yet been caught. Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or two. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2nd, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, he saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Azam may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Azam was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Azam claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Azam's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Azam and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Azam exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation.